Chapter 340. That stature. My rival! Rhea voiced out as he moved forward hurriedly. Timmy also seemed to recognize Gustav's stature from behind and followed after Rhea. Rhea arrived at their sitting position and sat down on the seat opposite Gustav. I knew it was you, Rhea voiced out as he stared at Gustav. Timmy sat on the seat towards Gustav's right side and greeted Gustav calmly. Gustav just nodded slightly back in response and ignored Rhea. You guys just left us back there in the last phase. And you, my rival, don't think I won't catch up soon. Just wait, you'll see, Rhea voiced out with a loud voice as he pointed at Gustav. Your spit is reaching all the way here. When will you learn how to be quiet? Another familiar feminine voice could be heard from behind. Eh? Rhea squinted his eyes as he looked ahead. A green-skinned girl, clad in a royal blue gown with pink gems embedded in different parts, forming flowery patterns, could be seen walking towards them from behind. A small hole was poked in the back of her gown, a little bit beneath the waist area where her long tail protruded out. Her presence attracted the attention of many guests, just like Rhea and Timmy. Another top 50 worldwide participant. Everyone who flocks around Gustav is powerful, Cowtail. You're here too? Rhea voiced out with a slightly irritated tone. Filthy loud mouth. I didn't think Matilda would invite you also, Glade said as she arrived before their table. Glade, Angie voiced out as she stood up with a delighted look on her face and jumped into Glade's embrace. Angie. Glade hugged Angie also and rubbed her hair affectionately. I didn't know you were also invited, Angie said as she withdrew herself from Glade. Matilda seems to have invited everyone, Glade said as she took a seat beside Angie. Now that there were 4 seated around this table, only 2 seats were left vacant. Glade greeted Gustav, who reciprocated, and everyone began to converse. This place is gonna be pretty noisy soon, Gustav said internally while sighing. This would have been a perfect get-together if a certain loudmouth wasn't around to ruin the occasion, Glade said with delight and disgust before turning to stare at Rhea afterwards. Hey, shut it, Cowtail, you only ranked higher than me in the entrance test, but I promised to catch up soon, Rhea responded. By the way, this table is reserved, so why are there still 2 extra seats here? Timmy asked while staring at the vacant seats. Maybe Matilda invited Falco too, Angie said with a contemplative attitude. Falco wouldn't attend. His family are enemies with the Koyun family, Timmy replied. Who cares about family feud? They are them, and we are ourselves. He's not a man if he doesn't dare to attend the party after being given an invitation, Rhea voiced out as he folded his arms and leaned his back against the chair with a repressed expression. Shut up. Not everyone's a tout like you, Timmy voiced out. He understood very well just how the big families behave because he came from one himself. Although Rhea was also the son of a well-renowned family in the city, he didn't act like it. He was the type who just liked to do things anyhow without caring about the consequences of his actions. Oh, I see. Maybe that's why he won't be attending, Angie said with an understanding look. But what about the other seat? Timmy asked while still staring at the 2 vacant seats. Maybe. Before Angie could complete her sentence, another person voiced out from behind. Yo, Gustav. Everyone turned around to stare at who had just arrived. Gustav could already tell who it was from the voice. He was a little surprised as he turned around to look. Approaching their table was a handsome-looking young chap with a bushy afro hairstyle and smooth melanin skin tone. His smile made him look quite confident and approachable. Eee? Gustav exclaimed. Who's this? Rhea and Timmy wondered as they stared at E. They hadn't come into contact with him before since they didn't meet up with Gustav and the rest during the final test phase. Hey man, how you doing? He reached out to give Gustav a handshake as he arrived before them. Gustav shifted his chair backwards and turned around to return the handshake. The guests were surprised to see Gustav greet someone in such a friendly manner. He didn't even get up when Rhea and Timmy arrived. Rhea and Timmy happened to come from influential families, Yet he acted nonchalantly with them, while the unknown person who has just arrived was welcomed more warmly. This made them wonder just who he was. Dash. Did he say Dash. Isn't that the participants with the highest amount of gathered grandstones? Dash. He was also among the ones who didn't attend the display of the final results, just like Gustav. Dash. Wasn't he from Malta City? What is B doing here? Well, he's not the only one from another city attending this gathering, if you know what I mean. Some of the youngsters who also passed the final phase remembered Yes, name from the display. Gustav was the participant with the highest number of points, but he managed to gather more stones than any other participant. He took a seat afterwards on Gustav's left, which was one of the vacant seats. You traveled from halfway across the world to be here, Gustav stated as they sat. Yeah, Matilda invited me, and I was like, this would be a great time to visit your city before we leave for camp to train for years in isolation. So why not? He replied with a smile. Ria and Timmy stared at scrutinizing him. Ria was especially focused on checking out to see what was so special about him that it made Gustav give him more attention than others. Calm down, fellas. If eyes could unclothe a person, I'd be naked by now. He voiced out with a burst of light laughter as he turned to stare at Ria and Timmy. Chapter 341. Everyone started laughing after hearing that, and Glade decided to throw in a little something extra too. Wait till he starts opening his mouth. You'll be assaulted by flying white bullets, haha, that's his bloodline ability, right? He asked cluelessly, but from the weird stares and laughter of everyone besides Ria, he figured out what she meant. Ria and Glade started arguing once again while Gustav discussed with They started catching up on some things that had happened recently. The place remained lively as different performances were done in the middle of the large living room. Matilda had sneakily waved to them several times from her sitting position. She was dressed like a princess today. She would have gone to meet them, but she had to stay up there and look pretty as many people came up one after the other to offer their congratulations. On one of the 3 tables to the right of Gustav was another group of people in luxurious outfits. They seemed to be a family due to the presence of 2 elderly men among the group of 5. A particular green-haired kid in their midst stared at Gustav's table and nodded. Now that I'm seeing him in person, he just might be strong enough to contend with me, he voiced out. Haha, Dietrich, are you kidding? There's no way that clown can match your strength. The other kid beside him with green and white-colored hair voiced out. He's no clown, Carter. I can see. Before Dietrich could complete his statement, one of the middle-aged men in their midst interrupted. You still held back during the test phase. If you didn't, you'd be a special class candidate by now, he said with a dissatisfied expression. If I didn't, I'd be interrogated and examined just like he's going to be when he enters the MBO camp, Dietrich said as he stared at the man. Would you like for that to happen, Uncle Garrett? He asked. Humph. Of course not. We don't want to draw their attention and find out. It's better he's drawing all the attention to himself. The one called Uncle Garrett responded. They all looked a bit similar to one another, which was enough to figure out that they were under the banner of one family. Let's just seal the deal with the princess of the Koyun family today. I hope you're ready, Dietrich. We came all the way from our city just for this. The other elder with large circular eyes voiced out. Yes, Dietrich answered while turning back to stare at Matilda, who was currently smiling while staring in the direction of Gustav's and Angie's table. Matilda's family had seats positioned right behind her. Several elders with haughty expressions could be seen among the other youngsters in the Koyun family. They all had white hair or partly white hair like Matilda. Once again, Gustav was unable to leave after an hour had gone by. Yes' appearance, along with the rest, made him change his mind. He hadn't expected to meet them here today, so he decided to still spend some more time here. After another hour went by, the youngsters were called to the middle of the living room to dance. Lots of the youngsters went over to Matilda to request her hand to dance, but she gave them one excuse or the other. Someone from her family came over to her to whisper something in her ear. When Dietrich from the Odeley family comes to ask you to dance, accept. This is the order from the elders. The young lady moved back to her sitting position after voicing this in Matilda's ear. Maltita's bright expression darkened a little. She forced a smile as she sneakily stared in the left direction, where a green-haired kid could be seen sitting in the midst of a group of 5. Come on, go now and ask for her hand. She doesn't dare say no, Dietrich's uncle urged while whispering in his ear. Dietrich noticed Matilda's brief gaze and stood up just as his uncle instructed and started moving forward. Matilda's right finger trembled slightly as she gulped down saliva. She suddenly stood up and started walking forward. Oh, looks like she's quite sensible going to meet up with him, the uncle muttered as they stared at Matilda walking forward. To their surprise, Maltita suddenly turned to the right, distancing herself from Dietrich's reach, and arrived in front of Gustav's table. Please dance with me, she voiced out the instant she arrived in front of their table, while stretching her hand towards Gustav. The guests and youngsters on the dance floor had astonished looks on their faces. Matilda was said to be very snobbish, so they didn't expect that she would ask Gustav to dance despite his status. The Koyun family behind all had looks of confusion. What is she doing? Did you give her the wrong message? One of the elders asked the lady who went to whisper to her ear the other time. No, I told her the decision of the elders, the lady answered with a look of confusion also. Angie, Glade and the rest of them on the table were surprised at the sudden request, so they stared at Gustav, waiting for his response. I didn't bargain for this, Gustav said internally. He didn't want to accept because he'd just draw more attention to himself, so he was hesitant. Matilda still had a smile on her face, but within her, she was begging and hoping that Gustav would agree. From the corner of her eyes, she could still see Dietrich approaching her current position. Please say yes, Gustav, Maltita was hoping internally, but Gustav was yet to respond. He raised his head up and stared at her eyes. Just what is she playing at? She should know that I wouldn't like this kind of stuff, Gustav said internally, not knowing that Matilda couldn't voice out her true intentions. Just as he was about to respond, Dietrich arrived before their table and stretched out his hand to Matilda. I humbly request for your hand in a dance, Dietrich voiced out. Matilda turned to stare at him, then at Gustav. I'm sorry, but I already asked for Gustav's hand, Matilda replied. He doesn't seem interested. Take my hand instead, Dietrich said with a charming smile hung on his face. Gustav stared at Matilda's expression. It was only for a moment, but he noticed that displeasure and slight trembling as her outstretched hand slowly descended. I accept, Gustav said as he reached out his hand and grabbed that of Matilda's before it dropped completely. Hope flashed in Matilda's eyes as she turned back to stare at Gustav with an even broader smile. Chapter 342. I accept, Gustav said as he reached out his hand and grabbed that of Matilda's before it dropped completely. Hope flashed in Matilda's eyes as she turned back to stare at Gustav with an even broader smile. Gustav stood to his feet and moved forward while still holding on to Matilda's hand. The members of the Koyun and Odeley family that were present had conflicted expressions on their faces as they watched Gustav and Matilda walk towards the dance floor hand in hand. Gustav didn't even spare Dietrich a glance as he walked past him with an unbothered expression. Even the other youngsters from prestigious families had heard of the Odeley family, but knowing Matilda's attitude, they wouldn't be surprised if she declined him despite their family's powerful status. They had no idea that in this situation, Matilda didn't really have a choice. She would have accepted if Gustav had refused her hand. Dietrich stared at Gustav's and Matilda's back as they approached the dance floor with a wry smile on his face. I don't think that was not intentional, he said internally as he started moving towards his seating area. Some girls around walked up to him to ask for a dance, but he declined them all. The Odeley family was known for being a very large family in the Far East, 4 cities away. They were even larger than 3 large families combined because they had businesses in about 10 different cities. Dietrich is among their youngest heirs, who is said to be the strongest in his generational line. He also took part in the MBO test entrance, and performed wonderfully, being among the top 5 worldwide. Although Gustav was currently more popular than any of them, Dietrich had been well known for a long time. Gustav and Matilda's bodies hugged each other as they swayed beautifully from place to place across the dance floor. Matilda leaned her chin on Gustav's left shoulder area as they danced. What's wrong with her? Gustav could feel her hurried breath on his neck. It was like she was scared of something, which had Gustav wondering. Matilda, what's happening? Gustav whispered the question into her ears. I can't explain everything here. But I promise to tell you everything when I get the chance. Please, for now, bear with my actions, Matilda pleaded. Gustav could feel the trembling in her voice as she pleaded. All right, just don't go overboard, Gustav replied. He could tell it had something to do with the presence of the youngster that asked for her hand. By the way, who is that guy? Gustav asked as they kept dancing. His name is Dietrich, he is from the Odili family. One of the most prestigious families in the Deep East, Matilda explained. Obviously he is. The haughty look, I'm familiar with that, Gustav said. Back in the seating area of the Odilis, Dietrich's uncle was voicing out harshly. She decided to pick that kid over you just because of momentary fame. TCH, the Koyun family, lacks foresight, the uncle voiced out. It's fine, uncle. She was already headed for him before I arrived. I heard that she even got to be a special class because of him, so Gustav is nothing to scoff at, Dietrich stated. Because they're both special class candidates now, the Koyun family looks down on us, the other kid voiced out. Gustav and Matilda continued to dance together for about 30 minutes until they finally decided to separate because Matilda had already come up with a plan to deal with her current predicament. She once again begged Gustav to follow up with whatever actions she performed later on. Gustav didn't like being kept in the dark, but he understood that whatever was happening was something she would spend a lot of time explaining, so he decided not to bother her about it right now until they were together alone. Matilda returned to her sitting position with a slightly tired look on her face. Anyone that asked her for a dance at this point was turned down with the excuse that she was tired. Dietrich noticed this and figured out that this would be the same outcome if he went over to ask her for a dance again, so he decided against it. After about an hour, the party was finally coming to an end. This was when families started coming forward to present gifts and ask for Matilda's hand for their sons, who were around the same age as Matilda. Gustav was really surprised to see such things happening. Is this how big families act? He didn't expect these people to be shameless enough to parade their heirs and sing the praises of their descendants as they requested Matilda to be betrothed to them. Our very own beloved son, Fresses, placed top 100 in the world ranking. I'm sure he's worthy enough. Not only is our family influential in the transport business, but our very own son is also placed among the top 100. I hope the Koyun family sees him as worthy enough. They came out one after the other, dropping gifts in front of Matilda. At the moment, a middle-aged man with white and gray hair was standing on the left side of Matilda while another man who looked no older than 30 years with very similar facial features to Matilda stood on her left. Thank you, we will wait for Matilda to consider and make a choice herself. The man on the left answered them one after the other with the same statement. She doesn't even know them, why would she accept? Could this be why she acted like that earlier? Gustav started to put 2 and 2 together. This was practically no longer a party. It had practically turned into a betrothal ceremony since Matilda had no choice but to pick someone at the end of the day. What is this? The ancient times? Gustav had a repressed look as he watched the display. Yo, I didn't know that this was even a thing. He voiced out. Gustav and Angie were the only ones with confused looks here. Glade, Rhea, and Timmy didn't look surprised as they watched the display. Chapter 343. Arranged marriage is a normal thing in big families. They are most likely to pair powerful mixed bloods from their families together to create even more powerful offspring. Glade decided to explain to Gustav, and Angie. But that's awful. She looks like she doesn't want it, Angie said with a disturbed look. She doesn't have a choice, Gustav responded. This might have something to do with why she wanted my help since the beginning, Gustav thought. The whole charade continued on for about 20 minutes till the orderly family present finally stood to their feet. The 5 of them walked towards the front, Dietrich included. Everyone's eyes focused on them, and even the people in front asking for Matilda's hand had to give way. Don't tell me the orderly family is also interested. Damn, if they ask for her hand, I don't see anyone else getting her besides Dietrich. Dietrich is in the top 5. The rest can't even stand in his shadows. The only people comparable to him here is those seating on Gustav's table. The guests spoke amongst themselves as they noticed the orderly family's actions. Young Miss Matilda, as you know, our young blood here is among the top 5 MBO test participants worldwide. Our family is among the most prestigious on the planet. What more could you need that can't be found in a young man such as Dietrich? Dietrich's uncle stated while making gestures. Carts and carts of different things were brought into the place. Unlike the other families who brought gifts, the orderly family gifts were way too plentiful and massive. Some of the gifts can fit into your living room, so we have placed them outside. The other kids spoke. It was practically like the orderly family came over to flex. You both are going to be in the MBO camp, which means you will have more time to get to know each other and do great things together. The uncle started speaking again. This is a great opportunity for both families' collaboration and creation of even more powerful offspring for the future generation. Don't you think so, Elder Mew? The uncle turned to stare at the middle-aged-looking man on Matilda's right after voicing out his question. And you, Sir Bill, your daughter will be in great hands. Who else would you have as your son-in-law? He turned to face the man on Matilda's left before voicing out. It turned out the man on Matilda's left was actually her father. The elder leaned slightly and whispered in Matilda's ear. You know who to pick. Do not disappoint me and go for Dietrich now. Matilda's face at the moment didn't have a smile anymore. She hid her current emotions under a poker expression. Matilda's father leaned slightly and whispered. It's all up to you, darling. It doesn't have to be Dietrich, but you know you have to pick someone here, or the elders will not let me off. Just go for someone that you feel you might like later on. Matilda's eyes squinted as she heard that. She stared at Dietrich, who was currently scrutinizing her from head to toe, with a smile. The other male youngsters in the vicinity already had lost hope of having Matilda the moment the orderly family became involved, but they still stood there and waited for Matilda's decision. Matilda turned her face to the side to stare in Gustav's direction. She and Gustav made eye contact, and Gustav instantly understood that she was about to make a decision that would include him. I guess I just have to go with it, Gustav sighed internally. Matilda stood to her feet and moved 2 steps forward. She turned left and right to stare at all the kids like she was observing them. The atmosphere turned tense as everyone waited for her decision. After a few more seconds, she spoke. Just like you said, Elder Garrett, it would be wonderful to bear powerful offsprings that we can be proud of in the future, which is why for that I want a very powerful partner, which is exactly why my nephew is perfect for you. No one here can match his strength. Dietrich's uncle replied. That is not quite true. Matilda replied. What? Check out these losers, which one of them can be compared to Dietrich? Haha, none of them even managed to make top 50 worldwide. Dietrich's uncle said with a burst of light laughter while pointing at the rest of the youngsters currently standing in front. Hey, just because they come from a big family doesn't mean they should bully others. TCH, that old man is so cocky just because they're from the Ogilvy family. Most of them in the vicinity were not happy with what they heard. No one would like to be called a loser even though they were inferior. These youngsters felt wrong, but they had forgotten that they were also quite cocky, and if they were in Dietrich's shoes, they'd also look down on others weaker than themselves. Not them, but yes, there's one that your nephew isn't as powerful as. Matilda voiced out. Just who is she talking about? The youngsters stared at themselves, wondering who that person was. Gustav crimson. Matilda said with a loud voice that echoed in the vicinity. Everyone's eyes slightly widened as they heard that. This was no doubt triggering since it was very true. Dietrich might be top 5, but Gustav was currently known as the undisputed first position, which was said to rival special class candidates before he even became one. The Odeley family had an expression of dissatisfaction as they heard that. They would have loved to dispute the claim, but they couldn't. I don't see him among the young men asking for your hand, so what do you mean, young miss? Dietrich's uncle asked. This was also the question on everyone's mind since they wanted to know where Matilda was going with this. Gustav also squinted his eyes as he stared in her direction. Of course I know that. What I am trying to say is... Matilda paused for a bit before deciding to continue. My standards for a partner are high because of Gustav's level of strength, so right now, I have only one requirement, Matilda added. Which is? Dietrich's uncle asked. I will only agree to take a partner that can defeat Gustav, Matilda voiced out. This is my only requirement. Defeat Gustav, and you can have my hand. Chapter 344. I will only agree to take a partner that can defeat Gustav, Matilda voiced out. This is my only requirement. Defeat Gustav, and you can have my hand. Chatter. 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 The entire place became noisy as they heard and processed Matilda's statement. Dash. She wants what? Dash. This might become an impossible task. Dash. I'm still gonna try. I just have to defeat Gustav. Dash. If I defeat him, I can have the Koyun family princess. I will have to train hard and try my luck. Everyone interested in Matilda turned to stare at Gustav. Gustav felt a bit uncomfortable seeing everyone turn to give him different kinds of stares. Some were stares of anticipation, some were stares of hopelessness, while some gave him crafty glances. A lot of them started formulating different plans in their minds. So this was her plan all along. I guess I just have to make sure none of these guys ever defeat me, Gustav said internally as he noted the looks of every suitor present today. So, young miss, if I heard you correctly, as long as anyone can defeat that boy Gustav, they can have your hand? Dietrich's uncle asked again. Yes, Matilda said with a look of conviction. I see. So you want to be assured of strength. Don't go back on your word later when my nephew defeats that boy in a battle, Dietrich's uncle stated while pointing at Gustav. Chatter. 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 If that does happen, I will not shy away from accepting Dietrich's hand, Matilda said before moving back towards her sitting position. What are you doing? The elder on her right whispered in her ear as she sat down. Elder, isn't the main purpose of doing this for us to bear the powerful offsprings that will represent both families in the next generation? I will not accept a partner that is weaker or less promising than Gustav. This is the best course of action, and I did it for the betterment of our family, Matilda answered without hesitation. The elder had a contemplative expression as he thought of her words. So when does this challenge start? Dietrich asked. It has started. You lots are free to challenge Gustav at any time, and if you ever do win, there has to be proof if I'm not present at that time, Matilda stated. But we still have to ask for his consent. Don't you think? Dietrich's uncle stated. If Gustav refuses, all this will crumble, Dietrich's uncle said internally as he turned to stare at Gustav. What do you say, young man? Will you be able to handle the challenges of every young man that is interested in young Miss Matilda? Think about it carefully. You have to handle numerous challenges every day, Dietrich's uncle said with a threatening tone. Gustav stared at him and Dietrich's for a few moments before turning to stare at Matilda, who had a longing look in her eyes. Of course I accept. I will be able to handle all of your challenges. Come at me when you lots are ready, Gustav stated with an unconcerned expression. Matilda sighed in relief internally as she heard that. Thank you, Gustav. Uncle, what do we do now? Dietrich moved over to his uncle's side and asked. Revealing your true strength right now is out of the question, but challenge him right now to probe his strength level, so we will come up with the best way for you to defeat him later on. Dietrich's uncle whispered back to Dietrich. Is there a limit to how many times we can challenge Gustav? Dietrich asked. Yes, you cannot challenge him any more after being defeated 5 times, Matilda replied. All right, Dietrich said before turning around. Gustav, I challenge you to a duel now. This would mean I have only 4 more tries after this, Dietrich added. Chatter. 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 Dash. He didn't even wait for the party to come to an end first. Dash. Looks like Dietrich is keen on embarrassing himself in front of everyone. Dash. I would at least go train and come back to try fighting Gustav first. Some of the youngsters in front felt Dietrich was stupid challenging Gustav right now, but they had no idea that this was just a ploy. Where would the battle hold? Gustav asked after hearing that. He was quite surprised himself that someone would challenge him right on the spot. This Dietrich doesn't seem like an overconfident idiot like most guys, so why would he decide to challenge me right now if he knows he can't win? Gustav wondered. We could move over to the Koyun family training ground. The duel can be held there, Matilda responded. The elders quickly acted and voiced out for the guests who were interested in watching to follow them as they led the way. Of course, no one left because everyone was interested in seeing how the battle between 2 top 5 would be. Especially when Gustav was involved. The others who were also interested in Matilda decided that they would use this as a means to observe and analyze Gustav. Everyone moved towards the southeastern area of the estate-like area where a small 33-meter mountain could be seen. Everyone moved up the mountain area and arrived at the top, where about 12 different stage-like fighting rings could be seen positioned around. Also, several robotic-like machines could be seen positioned in different places. A massive target practice was placed in front along with other pieces of equipment arranged all across the place. Gustav and Dietrich picked a stage that was somewhere on the left side of the mountain area. An electromagnetic barrier was immediately erected around the stage the instant they went in. The stage covered a radius of over 4,000 feet, so it was large enough, but the barrier was mostly to prevent stray attacks from making contact with the guests. The 200-plus guests gathered around the place and focused their eyes on Gustav and Dietrich. Gustav and Dietrich stood in front of each other, scrutinizing themselves. Shall we? Chapter 345. Shall we? Dietrich asked as he took a few steps forward. After you, Gustav said as he raised his right hand. All right, Dietrich replied before raising his finger and poking his neck, chest, and belly region. Gustav and practically everyone around was oblivious to the meaning behind his actions, but in the next second red glowing lines started appearing all over his face and exposed skin. Gustav suddenly felt the environment filled with pressure. Whoosh! Wind started blowing all around Dietrich, causing his green hair to float upwards. He just activated Gate 1. I have told him not to go beyond Gate 3 in this duel. He better listen, Dietrich's uncle said internally as he stared at Dietrich. He's pretty strong. Underestimating him would not be a sensible thing to do, Gustav said internally as he activated Sprint. Swoosh! It was as if both of them were in sync as they dashed forward at the same time. Dietrich straightened his left palm in a chop format as he swung it towards Gustav's neck. Swee-eye! Gustav spun and dodged the swing while swinging out his own leg in response. Bam! Leg and arm collided, causing Dietrich to spin from the colliding force, but then, as he did a 300-degree turn, he stabbed his right hand towards Gustav's chest. Gustav responded by slapping the arm away and pushing his right hand forward. Palm strike has been activated. The air was pierced through fiercely as Gustav's palm traveled towards Dietrich's chest. Dietrich reacted quickly by raising up his left arm to block his chest. Bam! Gustav's palm collided with his arm, causing him to be sent sliding backwards by several 10 feet. SSHHHSSS? He's not as fast as I am, but he reacts quite well to every one of my attacks. Gustav noticed this and stared at Dietrich, who was up ahead with a suspicious look. Damn, he is strong, Dietrich said internally as he slowly lowered his trembling left arm down. My bone almost got fractured from that hit. He stared at Gustav in front with an astonished gaze. As they paused for these brief moments, Dietrich raised his right finger and poked his left arm, right and left rib cage area, as well as his abdomen. Whoosh! The wind surrounding him quickly became more intense as he stared at Gustav. Gate 2, Dietrich's uncle said internally after noticing Dietrich perform that action. Dietrich raised his finger once more and pointed it at Gustav. Air pressure, force 1! The instant he voiced that out, the air surrounding Gustav suddenly got sucked into a small circle in front of him. Gustav felt the environment void of oxygen and dashed forward as he held his breath, but just as he took a step forward, boom! The sucked-in air suddenly exploded outwards with intensity. Kryyyyhhhhh. Whoomsh! Gustav had already moved several steps forward, but he still got caught up in the wind pressure explosion, which turned the vicinity of 100 feet into a small crater. Bang! The wind knocked Gustav forward, sending him flying towards Dietrich, who responded by swinging out his right arm. Gustav raised his arms upwards for protection since he wasn't able to counter the attack fast enough. Bang! It was like metal hitting metal as Dietrich's hand in a chop-like format collided with Gustav's arm, sending him flying backwards. Gustav did a flip in the air and landed several hundred feet away. He has gotten stronger. Gustav was able to notice this the instant both of their bodies made contact. The back of Gustav's shirt had been torn apart due to the pressure of the wind earlier, but he was glad he already pulled his jacket off earlier and gave it to E to hold for him. How is he still uninjured? That wind explosion is capable of knocking down a 12 inches thick brick wall. My strike earlier also barely had any effect. Dietrich noticed this. He and Gustav dashed forward again and traded blows. Bang! 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 With every hit, Gustav was able to confirm that Dietrich did get stronger after performing the actions he did earlier. Gustav was only a tiny bit more powerful in levels of strength right now. Dietrich used several air attacks as they battled, but Gustav was able to dodge every one of them this time since he wasn't taken unawares like before again. Impeccable speed, wonderful reflexes, top-notch fighting skills and unmatched strength, all without even activating his bloodline, Dietrich noted as they battled. He was slowly getting beat back and receiving minor injuries as the battle went on, but he wasn't ready to quit yet. Dash. Amazing, he's going against Gustav for this long. Dash. Yeah, I didn't even know that he would last this long. Dash. Gustav still hasn't made use of his bloodline ability though. Dash. Yeah, wasn't it transformation? The guests said amongst themselves as they watched. Gustav bent backwards as he dodged an air cannon firing from Dietrich and placed his hands on the ground. He made use of his palms to lift his entire body up and push his legs forward. Bang! His foot slammed into Dietrich's jaw, sending him flying backwards as blood flew out of his mouth. The ground beneath Gustav cracked open due to the hit. Gustav had managed to successfully land hits on Dietrich earlier, but this happened to be the most powerful one. Gustav landed back on his feet and dashed forward again. Combination activated, sprint plus dash, swoosh. Everyone was amazed by the immense acceleration as Gustav arrived in front of Dietrich's soaring body with an outstretched palm. Dietrich's body was currently upside down as it flew across the air with his back facing Gustav. Palm strike activated, bam! Gustav's palms slammed into Dietrich's back, causing a loud bone-cracking sound to ring out as a bust of wind blasted across the place. Swee-eye! Dietrich's body catapulted forward like a rocket launch as he slammed into the barrier on the other end while coughing out blood. Gasp! The entire crowd was wowed after witnessing this. It was expected, but they thought Dietrich would at least make Gustav activate his bloodline, but this didn't seem to be the case. Dietrich slid down the barrier, which was over 1,000 feet from Gustav's current position, and landed on his knees. Gustav stared at him with a suspicious look. Stay down, he voiced out. Dietrich opened his eyes, which were blurry due to the intense hit, and stared at the ground. He smiled as he wiped the blood from his mouth and nostrils before raising his head up to stare at Gustav. "I'm not done yet," he muttered as he stood to his feet and raised his right finger. He started poking different parts of his body again. Combination has been activated, sprint plus dash swoosh. Not this time, Sheldon. Gustav closed in the distance between them in almost an instant as he threw out his arched back right hand. Bang! His fist slammed into Dietrich's stomach, causing him to slam into the barrier again before passing out. KRHHKKKK. Cracks appeared on the barrier as Dietrich's body slid down. This time you are staying down, Gustav said as he turned around. Dietrich! Dietrich's uncle and other relatives that were present shouted with looks of concern as they stared at Dietrich, who had passed out on the stage. Chapter 346 Gustav won as expected. We have no chance of winning since Dietrich was not even able to get him to activate his bloodline. If he activates his transformation bloodline, that would mean he had gotten serious. This shows that I need to train harder and become stronger than I am before trying to fight him. Gustav had suddenly become a source of motivation for his peers who were interested in Matilda. The barrier was deactivated, and the Odeley family quickly went upstage to give Dietrich medical attention. Gustav walked down the stage and quickly took his jacket and wore it to cover the back of his clothes that were completely torn apart. Good job, man. You just saved Matilda from the torture she would have gone through getting married to someone she didn't like. He said to Gustav. I still wonder what she's playing at. And how long she intends to keep this going, Gustav said with a slightly suspicious look. Glade, Rhea, Timmy and Angie also stared in Matilda's direction as they heard that. Go talk to her, he suggested. I tried that before. They'll try something else this time, Gustav said as he walked away. Wait, Gustav, Angie called out, but he was already gone. The guests stared at Gustav with looks of admiration and envy as he moved towards Matilda. Angie stood beside Glade with a suspicious look on her face. Did he tell you anything beforehand about his invitation? Glade asked. No, he didn't say anything. I also didn't tell him I was invited, so. Angie responded but didn't complete her sentence. Why does the atmosphere between you two seem off? Glade asked while pulling Angie to the side. Well, that's because something happened yesterday, Angie muttered. Glade raised one eyebrow up as she heard that. Tell me everything. Over on Matilda's family side, she had just finished arguing with some of her family members over her requirement. They had to agree with her after she mentioned some things. So what if no one is eventually able to defeat Gustav? One of the elders asked. Matilda had a look of contemplation on her face as she heard this. She was unable to give an answer for a few seconds. I will take up the responsibility of marrying her myself, Gustav spoke up from up ahead as he approached the group. Huh? You will? Some of the elders voiced out at the same time. Yes, or am I not worthy enough? Gustav asked as he arrived in front of them. No, haha, you certainly are worthy enough. The Koyun family will be extremely blessed to have someone like you as our son-in-law. The elder who was initially bereaving Matilda voiced out with a smile. Matilda had widened eyes as she stared at Gustav with a look of disbelief. What is he doing? But that is only based on if none of her suitors are able to defeat me in the future. If I am defeated by any of them, she'll still have to become engaged with that person, Gustav stated. Yes, of course, we understand. The elders, as well as Matilda's father, smiled and nodded as they spoke. Now, if you lots don't mind, I have to speak with her alone, Gustav said as he held on to Matilda's hand and pulled with him as he walked away from the training ground. Angie and Glade didn't notice Gustav leaving the area hand in hand with Matilda because Angie was currently explaining what happened with Endrick to Glade. Everyone, thank you for coming. According to our young princess requirements, anyone that is able to defeat Gustav will get her hand in marriage, one of the elders announced again. There is something else I would like to announce, the elder said, causing everyone's attention to be drawn towards him, Angie included. If no one can defeat Gustav in the future, our daughter will be betrothed to him. It was like a bomb went off as he revealed that. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise as the entire place became noisy. What? Angie voiced out subconsciously as she heard that. Where's Gustav? She said while turning around to look. She felt indescribable mixed feelings welling up within as she looked around the place for Gustav. Glade quickly followed behind her along with Rhea and Timmy. This marked the end of today's event. As the guests slowly began to file out of the Koyen family residence, the Odeley family also bid their farewells as they promised that Dietrich would eventually defeat Gustav. Dietrich had been fed some recovery pills and was now back on his feet. He had checked for Gustav, wanted to have a word with him after gaining consciousness, but he couldn't find him anywhere, so he left with his family. Several minutes later, as they sat inside the private aircraft that was going to fly them back to their city, their uncle spoke. "You did well today," he voiced out. But was that really necessary?" Dietrich asked. "Yes. The next time you fight him, you will defeat him because now, he, along with everyone else, believes you have to poke different parts of your body to increase strength when in fact, you don't have to. Next time you're fighting him, taunt him with that a little more and then open the seventh gate suddenly to finish him off. I can guarantee you that he won't see it coming." Dietrich's uncle laughed lightly as he voiced out. All right, uncle, but he is quite powerful too. Who knows how powerful he will be the next time I fight him?" Dietrich said with a wary look. "No matter how powerful he becomes, the seventh gate will be enough to end him since it's powerful enough to handle a Pete Gilbert rank right now. Just make sure you fight him without anyone in attendance. We will make a video recording as proof, but no one must witness the fight between you two," Dietrich's uncle stated with a warning look. Gustav had brought Matilda to an unknown place within the Koyen family residence where flowers could be seen planted around a 400 feet reddish and brown colored tree. He leaned against the tree and stared at Matilda in front of him. "Now, tell me what you're hiding from everyone. What exactly are you planning?" Gustav asked while squinting his eyes. Chapter 347. Now, tell me what you're hiding from everyone. What exactly are you planning? Gustav asked while squinting his eyes. Matilda stood in place for a few seconds with a myriad of expressions displayed on her face before moving close to the tree and also leaning her back against it. "It's a long story. Are you ready to listen?" Matilda asked. Gustav nodded slightly in response before saying, "It's not like I have a choice now, do I?" A wry smile appeared on Matilda's face after hearing Gustav's response. She understood that she had put him on the spot today, but she had decided to make up for it in the future. Her face turned serious again before she started speaking. "When I was 7 years old, I had a friend," Matilda stated. "This friend of mine was from a different place entirely, lived an entirely different kind of lifestyle, but she and I became close really fast because the relationship between our parents was tight. We bonded even though we came from 2 different places. I showed her my way of life, and she showed me hers along with some of her memories. It was wonderful because we both saw beauty in our different lifestyles. This place you brought happens to be among the places we shared memories as kids." Matilda placed her hand on the tree and rubbed it while looking around with a smile on her face. Although her looks were different, I felt it was normal since lots of mixed bloods look different compared to humans. However, I later found out how wrong I was. My friend was an alien from the planet Abrukes. At that time, I never knew why she couldn't go to school, but every time I came back from school, we would meet here, and I would share stories with her. We were together for 3 years until one day. Matilda's voice and expression turned sad as she got to this point. Several spacecraft landed in our residence, and they took my friend and her parents away. I knew something wasn't right that day because I remember they were forced away like criminals on the run. I kept begging my father to do something about it, but I remember the look of helplessness on his face like it was yesterday. For some reason, my father couldn't do anything, and I had to watch my best friend being dragged away amidst tears. Matilda's eyes had turned red and watery at this point. It has been 7 years since I last saw her. At least that would have been the case if she didn't send me a message 2 years back. Matilda voiced out as she touched her storage bracelet. "Zing!" A small circular but flat-shaped object appeared in her hand. Gustav's eyes squinted as he stared at the device. "I suppose the recorded footage is stored there," Gustav muttered, and Matilda replied by nodding before tapping onto the surface of the object. Troinin! The image of a beautiful-looking girl with two pear-shaped golden eyes and purplish skin along with silky long black hair appeared above the device. There was a square-shaped black mark on her forehead along with green contour marks surrounding it. Boom! 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 Sounds of an explosion could be heard coming from the footage as it would seem that chaos surrounded her. The footage shook severely, and although the visibility of the surroundings was low, Gustav could see tiny red glowing particles in the surroundings. Matilda, I need your help. I didn't tell you the truth all those years ago, but am actually a princess to the largest empire on Abrukes. We are currently at war. My empire is lacking in forces after my grandfather, the emperor, was assassinated, and my father also went missing, leaving me to cater for the kingdom. I lost over 30% of my forces to bad leadership, and some even defected to the other kingdoms after deeming me unworthy to lead. Tears started streaming out of her eyes as she got to this point. I don't want my people to perish, so I will have to surrender. I know many of them will meet their end because of my decision, but I have no other choice so long as some lives can be preserved. I have repeatedly requested help from Earth, but they ignored my pleas, saying they cannot interfere in interplanetary wars. I do not wish to disturb you with my problems, but if this message does get to you, please, Matilda, get help for my people. I know you, Matilda, you're strong. When you become powerful enough, please try to save my people. If you can't, it's okay too, just make sure you live your life to the fullest and be happy. Regardless of what comes to be, I have always loved you, and I will always love you. I haven't forgotten all the times we spent together. Our fond memories are one of the things that kept me going through the toughest times. If I see a SSHHRRKKYYHHH. The footage suddenly came to an end before the princess was able to complete her statement. Matilda raised her hand and used her sleeves to clean her teary eyes. I always still wonder what she wanted to say at the end. I can tell that something happened. Matilda muttered with a sad look. Gustav, at this point, could more or less understand things. He began to put two and two together. This is why you don't want to get betrothed to anyone. You still intend to travel to her planet and save her people? Gustav voiced out with a contemplative expression. Yes. Although I love my family and wish for them to form connections, become larger and flourish, even more, they can survive without making use of me. Unlike Daria, I'm her only hope right now. Getting betrothed means being chained down, and I need freedom, so I can perform this task in the future. Matilda explained. Chapter 348. But what if she's already dead? It's been 2 years, and before you even manage to get strong enough to go on intergalactic missions, more years will pass. Even if she's alive now, what makes you think she will still be alive then? Gustav asked pessimistically. I have faith that she still is, Matilda answered. That's just being naive, Gustav replied while shaking his head in pity. It's better than being saddled down in despair, Matilda said with a look of determination. I will save Daria and her people. If Daria is dead, I will make sure I honor her memory by saving her people. Gustav sighed as he heard that and turned to face Matilda. So, the main reason you actually needed me was not just to stall your betrothal but also to help you save this girl and her people, right? Gustav stated. Yes, please. I'm sorry for keeping everything from you till now. I will totally understand if you decide to back out now. Matilda stared at the ground as she spoke. Gustav stood in front of Matilda and raised his right hand before placing it on her head. I think it's admirable that you'd think of doing something like that for someone you've been disconnected from for up to 7 years, Gustav said as he raised her head up to stare at him. I was skeptical about your intentions at first, but now it's all good, Gustav said as a small smile appeared on his face. It'll help you. The instant those words dropped from his mouth, a broad smile appeared on Matilda's face as she jumped into Gustav's embrace. Thank you, she muttered cheerfully as she hugged his body to hers. Whoa! Gustav was surprised by the sudden embrace, and was pushed backwards till his back was placed against the tree. Ahem! Gustav voiced out, causing the teary-eyed Matilda to regain her senses. Her eyes widened as she quickly separated herself from him. You didn't let me finish. It'll help so long as it doesn't clash with my goals because I also have plans of touring galaxies, Gustav stated. That's still fine by me. Matilda displayed her full set of beautiful white teeth as she voiced out. All right. Gustav had expected her to be disappointed by his statement, but she still seemed hyper. That being said, we need to start making plans as soon as possible, and you need to become Pa. Before Gustav could complete his sentence, someone screamed out his name from up ahead. Matilda turned around and noticed Angie far in the distance. We'll discuss this later, Gustav said as both of them started walking forward. Angie was coming towards that direction with Glade, Rhea and Timmy, along with a few guards from the Koyun family. They noticed Gustav and Matilda coming from up ahead side by side. Some of the guards even started voicing out their admiration as they noticed Gustav and Matilda. Young Miss Matilda and young Sir Gustav are a perfect match, one of them voiced out. Angie's forehead creased as she heard that. She was tempted to scream, "Shut up," but she held herself back. Gustav, Matilda, you both have been gone for quite some time, Rhea voiced out the moment they were close. We had personal business to talk about, Gustav replied as they arrived in front of them. Personal business like? This was the same question on everyone's mind, but Rhea was the only one dumb enough to voice it out. None of your business, Matilda responded. Rhea. Hey man, I'ma have to leave now. I need to get back home to my mama. He voiced out as he stood in front of Gustav. You should meet my sister one of these days. She's a huge fan. He added. Oh, I wouldn't mind that, Gustav replied. You two would make cute babies together. She's single. He winked as he added, causing Rhea and Timmy to burst into laughter behind. Angie was not finding that remark funny, so her forehead creased even more. Glade was on her friend's side, so she also didn't laugh. Gustav laughed lightly before speaking. All right, you need to go. Yeah, I think I do, before Angie stares me to death. He said as he noticed Angie's dark glance. Take care, man. He shook Gustav's hand before turning around with some of the guards escorting him. I think he'll leave you girls to catch up first, Gustav said as he started walking away also. Rhea and Timmy followed behind, leaving Angie, Glade and Matilda there. Matilda smiled at both of them before gesturing for them to follow her back to their house. Several minutes later, the three girls sat in the dining area and started discussing. Matilda, do you like Gustav? Angie asked with a slightly shaky voice. Huh! Matilda exclaimed with a confused expression. An hour later, Gustav and Angie arrived back home. Angie looked swell and quite delighted as they got down from the ride that brought them back. She and Gustav walked upstairs to the last floor amidst the glares and looks of admiration their neighbors were throwing at them. As they arrived at the corridor, Angie spoke. Gustav, do you still remember our date tomorrow? Angie asked. Sure I do. Where do you want us to go? Gustav asked. Let's meet up at the Kremlin restaurant by 5 p.m. tomorrow, is that okay? Angie asked. 5 p.m. All right, cool, Gustav responded as they arrived in front of each other's apartments. Angie bid him goodbye and walked into her apartment. As she shut the door behind, she breathed out a long breath and placed her back against the door. I'll have to make use of the advice Glade gave me, she muttered underneath her breath before moving forward. Gustav also arrived within his apartment and took off his jacket. I can just hold off whatever I want to say till tomorrow, Gustav muttered as he proceeded to head towards the bathroom. Several minutes later, he finished showering and moved to his bedroom to change. I might have to spend the entire night within the borders testing out my Yarki, Gustav said as he got clothed in black. I will also be getting my armor clothing tomorrow. Friday hunting the mixed breeds needed for the new department Mr. Gon is giving me. Gustav's mind suddenly recalled something as he got to this point. I am yet to open the package Mr. Gon gave me, Gustav stated. He finished putting on his clothes and walked towards the living room. He grabbed the small box on his reading tab and started to unwrap it. Chapter 349. He grabbed the small box on his reading tab and started to unwrap it. He already knew what was within was recorded footage, so he wasted no time tapping the play button. Truinin. A holographic footage displaying a particular part of the city appeared before him. The moment Gustav saw the high-rise buildings on both sides of the road, he instantly recognized this part of the city. The footage focused on the part of the road where the transportation spatial ring could be seen. Isn't this? Gustav mumbled as he kept watching the bleeping dark blue and purplish waves within the spatial ring. Zuhun! The spatial ring made some weird sounds and brightened up a little, and in the next instant, Gustav saw himself walking out of the ring naked. Just as I thought. It was truly that day, Gustav said with a look of displeasure. How is it that I didn't notice this? Gustav wondered as he kept watching the footage. He could be seen breathing in and out profusely as he walked a few steps forward. Based on the closeness of the recording device, this is within my range of detection, which means it was zoomed in from far away, Gustav analyzed. As Gustav sped off into the distance a few moments later, the recording device zoomed out, and Gustav figured out just how far it was from his location. His speculation was right because he could tell that the video was taken from more than 10 blocks away. We got him. These were the next words Quadav heard before the footage came to an end. For Mr. Gon to give me this. He must have gone through some trouble to acquire it. Gustav muttered with a look of gratitude as a milky glow covered his hands. Atomic disintegration has been activated. The object that displayed the footage slowly disintegrated and started to disappear into thin air. This shows his sincerity, Gustav said as he closed his palm completely after the object had been completely incinerated. He knew how this would have caused a big stir if it was revealed to the general public, since no Zulu rank mixed blood was supposed to have a body as sturdy as his. A lot had already been revealed to the general public, and he was still being questioned based on those revelations. This would make things far worse than the current situation. Gustav decided that he would call Mr. Gon later to thank him. A few moments later, he proceeded to leave the house. After several hours had gone by, Gustav was within the border, standing on a rocky path with a pinkish glow spread outwards from his body. A large crab-like creature with green pincers could be seen moving according to the movement of his fingers and words. Stop! Gustav commanded, and the creature immediately came to a stop. Gustav checked on his Yarki and noticed that he still had around 30% of energy left. Am able to keep level 7 mixed breeds under my control for about 30 minutes before running out of energy. Gustav took note of this. In the last few hours, he had been using his Yarki on different levels of mixed breeds and calculating the usage of energy in tune with the time he spent putting them under his control. He has only used his Yarki on the mixed breed in front of him for about 5 minutes, but he was able to calculate the time he would be able to keep them under his control if his energy was full. That's enough experimenting for today. Gustav dashed forward and used Slash repeatedly. Slash has been activated. His arms were coated in a milky glow as they sliced through the legs of the creature, making it handicapped a few moments later. You have killed a quintlet mutated crab, plus 20,000 EXP. Gustav deactivated his Yarki afterwards and took the remains of the mixed breed before leaving the scene. He didn't want to make the mistake of overusing his Yarki once again, but with today's experiment, he could more or less understand how his Yarki worked. It would be able to affect creatures and beings 3 to 4 levels higher than him, but the higher the level, the lesser the amount of time they will remain under its influence. The serpentine creature he fought the other time was only under its control for less than a minute. Gustav could tell that if he wanted to make use of his Yarki on a creature 1 level higher, it wouldn't last up to a second. He decided he would come here again tomorrow to test it out, and keep training with it for the next few days that he was going to be around the neighborhood. Gustav got back into his apartment close to midnight, and immediately started the process of recharging his Yarki. This time it was way faster than before since it didn't completely run out of energy. In a few hours, Gustav went to bed after it got recharged back to 100%. Gustav woke up around 10 am in the morning, different from his usual time of waking up. Because of his lack of sleep during these days, he had actually slept longer than he wanted to. "Good morning, sunshine." Gustav heard the voice of the system as he stood to his feet. "What's with the cheesy greeting?" Gustav had a weird look on his face as he spoke. "Have you forgotten when you mentioned that I didn't interact with you?" "Well, I'm doing that now." The girly voice of the system turned cuter as it spoke. "That sounds quite disgusting." "Stop it," Gustav said with a look of discomfort. "Guess what's disgusting?" "Your morning breath," the system voiced out with a slightly annoyed tone. "Gustav, aren't you forgetting something?" the system asked. Forgetting what?" Gustav asked. "Your daily tasks," the system reminded. "I didn't forget my daily tasks. I'm not about to start today's daily task. I'm not that dumb." Gustav paused as he remembered something. "I missed 2 days. Which means I have to complete 3 days' worth of daily tasks. A total of 9 today," Gustav stated with a look of realization. "There you go, Sherlock," the system voiced out with a solemn tone. "Failure to complete even one of these tasks will result in a 3-day punishment." Chapter 350. Failure to complete even one of these tasks will result in a 3-day punishment, the system added before displaying the 3 days' worth of daily tasks together. Gustav's eyes opened wider as he stared at the 9 daily tasks. Daily tasks: description, 1/9, do a consecutive front and back 6 meters leap 70 times, description, 2/9, use a single finger to support your entire body weight for 3 hours, description, March 9th, stop a stranger on the road and give them a lift on your back to their destination, description, 4/9, hunt and defeat 2 level 10 Giorno stallion mixed breeds, daily tasks, 5/9. Survive underwater for 2 hours without any equipment. Gustav kept reading the descriptions one after the other, and for each one, his facial expression would change. This kept happening till he completed the last one. "What is up with these weird quests? And I have to finish them today?" Gustav said with a tone of disbelief as he stared at the list from top to bottom and from bottom to top repeatedly. "What do you mean weird? You better check out the punishments before thinking of trying to ditch any of these," the system voiced out. Punishment for failing to complete tasks: have stats for a day, dash 500 credits from shop currency, teleportation, rewards for completion, +1, 200, 000 EXP, all skills level up, +2 stats points for all attributes, recreation evolution. Gustav stared at the punishments and scoffed. "Who are you trying to scare with those? They'll definitely complete the tasks even though they are just as weird as you are," Gustav voiced out. "Look who's talking. Don't get me started with you, virgin," the system retorted back. "Gustav, by the way, what's that teleportation thing? How is that a punishment?" Gustav asked. "You'll find out when you fail. If you're so curious, why don't you consider failing?" The system laughed lightly as it suggested. Gustav ignored its words, reminding himself not to ask the system any questions anymore. He moved out of his apartment a few minutes later and went on to start the daily tasks. He decided to hunt for the mixed breed needed first. The Giorno stallion mixed breed was a muscular and rare type of mixed breed. It was like a combination of a gorilla and a horse due to its very muscular limbs. Gustav had only come into contact with this type of mixed breed once within the border, and at that time, he was unable to defeat it because of its speed and power. With a pound of its 2 front legs, it was capable of crushing objects with a sturdy weight of 4,000 pounds. Gustav had already done research on them, so he knew they liked to hang out in moist areas to moisturize their hoofs. Swoosh! Gustav arrived within the border in a few minutes and started moving towards the northwestern area. He used the map to move towards a place within the border where a small swamp was located. Gustav arrived at the swampy area in a few and made use of one of the vines to climb atop a tree to scout the place. He kept looking around for the next 30 minutes till he finally found one, a Giorno stallion mixed breed standing in a muddy, swampy area in between two trees. Gustav slowly and silently advanced by making use of the vines to swing forward before landing on a tree branch a few meters from the position of the mixed breed. The instant Gustav landed on the tree, the mixed breed noticed his presence and instantly turned around with an alarmed look. It stared at Gustav and suddenly jumped forward before Gustav could get to analyze the situation. Thump! Tum! Its two front legs crashed into the tree just as Gustav also jumped away from it. Bang! The tree was sent crashing down instantly, causing a loud sound of snapping branches to reverberate across the place. Gustav grabbed a vine and swung forward as the mixed breed chased after from behind. The Giorno Stallion mixed breed was also capable of leaping far distances with its powerful legs. The instant this particular one leapt, it arrived behind Gustav with its two front legs pounding forward with intensity. Gustav let go of the vine and started free falling, which allowed him to miss the leg of the mixed breed. First off, before I waste my time. Is that a level 10? Gustav asked. That is a level 10. Lucky for you, it's still bordering on the line of breakthrough into level 11. The system replied, causing Gustav to sigh in relief. But guess how many levels it will go up if it manages to eat you? The system added. Gustav. Gustav quickly leaped backwards in the next instant, dodging the landing of the creature. Mud was sent splashing everywhere, but Gustav still bolted forward with speed in the next instant. His speed was reduced due to the thick mud that kept splattering everywhere as he moved forward. The Giorno Stallion also leaped forward, stomping towards Gustav's face. Gustav could feel the intensity and the amount of force those mighty legs carried as they moved towards his face. Luckily, he was only slower than it a little when making use of sprint. Gustav spun around and sent his palm towards the right front leg of the creature. Slash has been activated. A milky glow coated his palm as it arrived before the leg and slammed into it. Thioning. A loud metallic sound rang out as the creature spiraled across the air and landed several meters towards the side due to the collision. Looks like what they say about its legs being extremely sturdy is no joke, Gustav said internally as he discovered that his hit didn't manage to damage the creature's legs. The Giorno Stallion quickly jumped back to its feet again after being beaten down and ran towards Gustav. Gustav, who had realized that he shouldn't aim for its legs, started transforming into the mutated bull. His legs that were initially being trapped by the slightly deep mud were now moving with ease. Chapter 351. Gustav arched his muscular brown fur-covered arm backwards as he arrived in front of the creature and threw his fist forward. Bang! 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 Several heavy sounds of collisions reverberated across the place as Gustav's fist slammed into the legs of the creature again. It was very nimble, so it was able to counter Gustav's fist by raising its legs. Gustav grabbed hold of both legs after the creature managed to counter his attack and pull it with force. HNGGGHHH. Gustav easily overpowered the creature and flung it towards the side, causing it to slam into several trees. I don't have all day, so I have to make this quick, Gustav said internally before leaping forward with a decisive expression. About an hour later, Gustav could be seen sitting at the bottom of a stream with closed eyes. He was only clad in shorts as he sat at the bottom and held his breath. His clothes were on the surface. Now, this isn't such a bad place to meditate, Gustav said internally as he closed his eyes and focused on channeling his bloodline. I will be breaking through to the serial rank any time from now. That was pretty fast, Gustav said internally as he checked his bloodline. He noticed the roots his original bloodline was forming had become so long that they were now connecting to different parts of his body. About 2 hours later, Gustav was out of the border and was currently in the neighborhood area, lifting a young lady on his back as he ran forward. The young lady had a hearty smile on her face as she hugged Gustav's back to her chest and closed her eyes. It was obvious that she was already in her world of imagination as Gustav dashed fastly towards her choice of destination. In a few more minutes, they arrived in front of a nursing home, and Gustav dropped her. Oh, thank you, Gustav, erase my contact. Just as she voiced out in delight, she noticed that Gustav was no longer in front of her. Oh, where did he go? I wasn't able to get his contact, she voiced out with a dissatisfied expression. As Gustav dashed back home, he checked out the progress of his daily tasks. Daily tasks: March 9th, stop a stranger on the road and give them a lift on your back to their destination. One would think this would be a hard task, but since Gustav was quite popular in the neighborhood, he only needed to walk up to anyone and ask if he could do this. So, it was quite simple. However, that didn't change the fact that Gustav saw it as weird. It was already around 2 in the afternoon, so Gustav knew he had to be fast in completing these tasks since he had a date with Angie by 5 p.m. Gustav started heading back towards the forest area before the border. When he got there, he started leaping back and forth repeatedly. After another 2.5 hours had gone by, Gustav checked his progress. Daily tasks: 6/9 race back and forth to the MBO tower from your apartment. Now he only had about 3 more tasks to perform for the daily tasks to be complete. The issue with the tasks was that they were a lot of time-taking tasks, so he spent longer time finishing some of them than he normally would. But right now, he couldn't continue with the tasks because, as promised earlier, he had a date with Angie. He decided he would come back to finish them after the date, so he decided to head home and prepare. In about 20 minutes more, Gustav was done with preparations. He moved out of his apartment, dressed in a wine-colored suit he bought some time ago with a black cotton fabric within. He even styled his hair a bit. He met Angie in the passageway dressed in a tight long sleeveless white and pink gown. Both of them had made each other speechless for about a few seconds as they stared at each other. Angie's face turned really flushed as she stared at Gustav's handsome face. Gustav also stared back at her with a look of hidden admiration. His eyes stopped on her cherry-red lips, and he recalled something causing him to look away. Shall we?" Gustav asked while gesturing towards the right that led to the stairs. H&M. Angie smiled in response as she walked side by side with him. Different kinds of thoughts were running about her mind as she remembered his gaze a while ago. Downstairs a ride was already waiting to take them to the Kremlin restaurant, which was about 3 blocks away from where Angie and Gustav usually parted ways when heading for school in the past. Angie was unable to say a word within the vehicle due to nervousness as they traveled towards their destination. Gustav, on the other hand, still had different thoughts circulating in his mind and had decided he was going to mention what was on his mind to Angie today. In a few minutes, they arrived in front of a 37-story beautiful-looking building and walked in. They headed towards the elevator and stopped at the 30th floor, which happened to be where the restaurant was situated. A few minutes later, Gustav and Angie were seated in an open space where a view of the city could be seen on their left side. Their table was packed with all kinds of delicious foods Gustav ordered, and they started to feast. Their passable steak is passable, but they really need to change the cook that made this tradashi dish. Boss Danzo is so much better, Gustav muttered as he ate. Eating like this always reminded him of Boss Danzo. You really are a food lover. Angie smiled as she voiced out before putting another spoonful of food in her mouth. Have you seen anyone who cooks that doesn't love food? Gustav asked. Angie smiled back as she kinda understood what Gustav meant. So Angie, you go first, Gustav suddenly voiced out. What do you mean? Angie asked after sipping some water. I know you have something to say. Go ahead first before I say mine, Gustav stated. Chapter 352. I know you have something to say. Go ahead first before I say mine, Gustav stated. Angie paused her eating as she heard that and stared at Gustav with a wry smile on her face. I'm so predictable, aren't I? Angie voiced out. Well, we wouldn't be here if you didn't have things to say, Gustav muttered as he gulped down some water and cleaned his mouth. The thing is, I wanted to apologize for stopping you the other day, Angie said with a crestfallen expression. I know it seems like naivety, but only did that because I know what it's like to have a little brother. Although your situation is way different from mine and your relationship with him is practically the opposite of mine with my brother, I still felt like you killing him would have been too much, but now I understand something that I didn't get before, Angie muttered as she stared at Gustav. However, even if time was reminded, I would still stop you if killing him would end up hurting you mentally. Angie's voice suddenly turned solemn as she got to this point. You already have less faith in the world. The world failed you and turned you into what you are today. I'm not saying it's bad, but I wouldn't want your personality to take a turn for the worse because of a decision I could have stopped. I would hate myself forever if something ever happened to you. Angie's lips trembled as she spoke. I understand why you would want to do it, and I promise I won't stop you again if it's a normal circumstance, but I will not allow you to kill a member of your family. If he comes close to you next time. Angie raised her head and stared at Gustav with a decisive expression. I will kill him myself, she voiced out. At this point, Gustav had his mouth opened slightly in surprise as after listening to Angie. He stared at her hands and noticed that they were trembling slightly. Just how much courage did it take for her to decide on such a thing? Gustav was really moved by her decision. I kind of figured she stopped me thinking I was going to get affected if I killed Hendrik. Sigh, she's overthinking things, Gustav said internally. It's one thing to make this claim. But can you truly do it? Are you capable enough? Is your resolve strong enough, and most importantly, are you powerful enough? Gustav asked in succession. I can become strong enough to defeat him if I truly stopped holding back. Angie replied with a shaky tone. Gustav didn't really doubt her statement because Angie really had a lot of potentials if she went full force, but then this wasn't just a case of defeat. He still doubted that she had enough resolve to actually kill someone. Why are you so adamant in believing that my mental state will be affected if I was to kill Hendrik? Gustav questioned. Gustav, can you tell me that you never shared any good memories with Hendrik? Angie muttered. Gustav's mouth opened slightly, but then he closed it back, unable to say a word. If you can tell me that you never shared one good memory with Hendrik, he'll never interfere with your affairs again, she added. Memories began to flood into Gustav's head back to when Hendrik was just a baby. He had started being maltreated at that time, but he always felt happy whenever he sneakily went to his little brother's cot to play with him. He remembered Hendrik's innocent and cute smile as a baby. When Hendrik was 2 years of age, he stood in front of Gustav to protect him from his parents' beating at that time. Hendrik had already been confirmed to have an A-grade bloodline, so their parents treated him with so much care. When he started screaming and crying because of Gustav's maltreatment, they had to stop whenever he was present. Gustav was reminded of when his little brother was his source of refuge and happiness when he was still around the ages of 1 to 5. Everything began to change when Hendrik became a student of Echelon Academy and got promoted to a class beyond his age. He remembered how Hendrik started to see others as lesser than himself. Gustav's parents at that time didn't caution him, and everyone around him kept singing his praises, so his character started to warp into something more twisted. Gustav tried his best to correct some of Hendrik's wrong actions when Hendrik bullied a classmate, but it was practically him versus society. Everyone praised Hendrik for his wrongdoings while Gustav chastised him. Hendrik liked being in the spotlight, so he stopped listening to Gustav. At one time, Hendrik witnessed Gustav being beaten up without being able to fight back. This was practically the turning point for Hendrik. Why do I have such a weak person such as yourself as my big brother? Gustav could never forget this question that was asked with a look of immense disdain. From that point onwards, Hendrik stopped protecting him and even became among those that assaulted him. Gustav had a slightly conflicted look as these memories flooded in. Listen. Your little brother was surrounded by insane people like your parents all his life. He's 12 years old just like my brother, so I think he still has room for change if he finds the right environment. Angie voiced out. I had already given him several chances to back away, but he still came back. What makes you think he'll change? Gustav asked with a slightly annoyed expression. He didn't like the fact that he had to recall all those memories because it made him feel like Angie was right to have stopped him. He still hasn't been given a change of surroundings. The MBO training camp will be the best place for him to learn humility, since he's not the only one who's special. But if he doesn't, like you said. Angie slightly raised her right hand as she spoke. If he still comes back looking to kill you, let me take care of it. I'll kill him myself, Angie stated. Gustav leaned his chin against his fists as he placed his elbows on the table. Angie, I have a question for you, Gustav said as he stared deeply into Angie's eyes. Oh, well, all right. Angie could feel her face burn up as Gustav maintained eye contact with her. Do you have feelings for me? Gustav asked with a tone of mysticism. Chapter 353. Do you have feelings for me? Gustav asked with a tone of mysticism. Huh! Angie's eyes widened as she heard that. Aye. Angie was shocked by the unexpected question, so she stammered repeatedly before closing her mouth and looking down. Gustav silently waited for her answer. After breathing in and out speedily for a few seconds, she finally answered. Yes. I do have feelings for you. Angie looked up and placed her right hand on her chest. Just as I thought, Gustav muttered. Angie. Gustav called out. Why, yes, Angie responded with a longing gaze. The truth is, I am also quite fond of you, Gustav voiced out. Angie's eyes dazzled with anticipation as she heard that. But I will not accept this feeling of yours, Gustav suddenly voiced out. Huh? Why? Angie asked with a look of confusion. Many reasons, but let's start with you becoming a distraction, a form of weakness that I don't want, and your recent claim. Angie, have you ever killed someone before? Gustav asked. Angie didn't even need to answer. They both knew she had never killed someone before. Angie, now I will tell you the decision I have come to. Gustav started speaking again after the initial silence. Angie could hear the loud sound of her heart pounding as Gustav spoke. First off, we will not be partners within the MBO. Angie's eyes widened as Gustav's first statement drifted into her ears. We will stay away from one another. I will not speak to you even if you try to speak to me. We shall neither be friends nor shall we be enemies. You can live and train however you will over there, but let's make sure to avoid each other. With every word spoken, Angie felt like her heart was being wrenched. No, how? Why? Tears began to stream out of Angie's eyes as Gustav kept speaking. Gustav didn't even stop talking when he noticed her tears. Gustav finished listing out his plans, and Angie stared down as she wiped her uncontrollable tears with her sleeves. I know it's my fault. I deserve this for being too soft. Different thoughts of self-blame streamed into her mind. A deep feeling of sadness welled up from within her. She remembered Gustav mentioning that he would pick a better girl to be his companion. Angie. Gustav suddenly called to her. There's only one way to stop this, Gustav added. Angie raised her head, and her sad eyes glittered with hope. When you finally kill a person with your own strength and jurisdiction, he'll accept your feelings, Gustav stated. Kill someone? Angie voiced out. Yes. I still think you're not capable enough to take someone's life, so this is my one task for you. I cannot let you be my partner if you're too naive and unable to be decisive enough at moments that could be life-threatening. If you manage to pull it off, I will accept your feelings, Gustav explained and stood to his feet right after. It's your decision to make in the end, Gustav added before turning around to leave. I'm heading to the restroom. We'll give you some time to think by yourself, Gustav said as he walked away. On Angie's face, it was obvious that a lot of thoughts were going through her mind as she sat there. Gustav was on his way to the restroom. He bumped into someone familiar. Aren't you Mr. Gon's granddaughter? Gustav voiced out as he noticed the girl with green and white hair walking along the corridor towards him. Ah, yes, you remember me, Gustav, she voiced out with a look of delight. She moved closer to Gustav and stood in front of him. She suddenly jumped onto Gustav and locked her legs around his waist and her arms around his neck. What are you doing? Gustav voiced out, but before he could drag her off, she leaned towards his neck and gave him a love bite. Gustav felt her cold tongue and soft lips press against his neck. His eyes widened as he reached out and grabbed the girl's neck before forcefully pulling her from himself. Voyez! Gustav flung her towards the other side, and she reacted by doing a flip in the air, landing several feet away. He placed his hand on his right neck area and rubbed it with a disgusted look on his face. Vera had a smile on her face as she licked her lips and stared at Gustav. I knew you'd taste sweet. Ever since you defeated me along with everyone who was mind-controlled during the last test phase, I couldn't get you out of my mind HNGHH. Vera voiced out and made a weird moaning sound as she placed her hand on her right chest. You hit me right here. I can still feel your hand on my chest till now, Vera said as she squeezed her right boob with a look of delight. Gustav's face was full of confusion right now as she listened and stared at her. Why does she seem different from when I saw her at the party? Gustav wondered as he recalled that she was silent and snobbish all through the party. Luckily, only a single person had passed through this corridor since this whole scenario began. This corridor led to the bathroom area, so it wasn't crowded in the slightest. The person who even passed was a man who gave Gustav a thumbs up and a wink when he saw Vera kissing his neck. Look, I don't know what you... Before Gustav could complete his statement, Vera interrupted. Let me be yours. That girl isn't good enough for you. Just like you said, she's soft, Vera voiced out as she moved closer to Gustav. You were eavesdropping on our conversation? Gustav voiced out with a look of realization. What does that matter? She isn't right for you, but I am HNGH. Vera bit her lips as she spoke and walked to Gustav's front again. You're clearly delusional. Get out of my way. Gustav had decided that he had enough of this, and shoved her aside to start moving forward. Chapter 354. She turned around to stare at Gustav's back as a creepy smile appeared on her face, and she jumped forward. She was going to land on Gustav's back this time, but he suddenly turned around and grabbed her by the neck while she was still in midair. Do you want my partnership with your grandfather to end because of you? Gustav asked as he tightened his grip around her neck while holding her up like a helpless chicken. However, instead of Vera's face to show pain, she seemed to be enjoying Gustav's grip getting tighter on her neck. What in the world is wrong with this girl? Gustav eventually had to let go of her, seeing that his actions were proving to be useless. Stay away from me, Gustav voiced out before dashing forward with speed and entering the men's bathroom. Vera was unable to go after him any further, so she just stood in place with a smile on her face. I have marked you. You will be mine, Gustav Crimson, Vera said with a smile as she started walking away from the corridor. Back in her seating position, Angie's face mirrored a myriad of complex expressions. It's just to kill one person. You can do it. How can I fathom killing a living person? I entered the MBO with the intention of saving people. I can't save anyone if I continue to remain naive and keep holding back. Different thoughts circulated in her mind that were plagued with opposing thoughts. After a few more minutes went by, Gustav arrived back at their table, and they decided to head home. Gustav didn't say a word to her as they journeyed back home because he could tell that she was still gathering her thoughts. Gustav sighed internally as he thought, I had to turn down 2 love requests today. He hadn't forgotten the crazy Vera and touched his left-right area. Tryon. What Gustav didn't notice was the bluish circular runic-like glow that appeared on his neck. It appeared for an instant and disappeared a moment later. What was that? The system suddenly asked. What was what? Gustav responded internally with a slightly confused expression. I just felt something. Like something integrated with you a moment ago. The system muttered with an uncertain tone. What are you talking about? Gustav asked. I'm not sure, but I did feel something a while ago. Gustav knew the system would be more sensitive to unknown and external forces, so he felt it wasn't messing around. Why don't you do a scan or something? Gustav suggested. I'm doing that right now, but I can't find anything. They'll have to keep investigating in the meantime. All right, Gustav said internally as he and Angie arrived in front of their apartment. It was around 7 in the evening at this time. They had spent a shorter time outside than Gustav had expected. He felt this was due to his decision. This is necessary, Gustav said to himself. He couldn't help but remember Angie's tears, which caused ripples in his heart, but he consoled himself by deciding that this was necessary. When they both arrived in front of their apartments, Gustav turned around to stare at Angie. From tomorrow, I will avoid you until you meet my requirement, Gustav voiced out and turned back around. Gustav, are you going to be with another girl if I'm unable to do that? Someone like Matilda? Angie asked with a sad tone. Yes, Gustav replied without hesitation. Angie felt her heart breaking even more as she heard this and leaned on her apartment door for support. But, just so you know, I'm not really captivated by any of them, Gustav added as his apartment door slid open. Except you, Gustav said as he walked in. Angie's eyes widened as she heard that and turned around, but Gustav was already gone. What does he mean by that? Angie wondered. In the next second, her apartment door also opened up, and she went in. Welcome back, darling, how did? Angie's mother paused as she noticed her daughter's sad face. I'm going to bed now, good night, Angie voiced out as she went straight in. Wait, Angie, what's wrong? Her mother voiced out, but the only response she got was the sound of the room door being closed. Something's up with Big Sis. I bet Big Brother Gustav rejected her, Phil voiced out bluntly from the sofa area. Shut up, boy, don't be insensitive, his mother shouted out with a slightly annoyed tone. Well, why else will she be looking like those girls in soap operas after they got cheated on by their boyfriend? Phil added. Angie's mother. After walking into his apartment, Gustav breathed out lengthily. How exactly do I feel about Angie? Gustav asked himself. Idiot, stop being love-struck, you have less than 5 hours to complete your daily tasks, the system reminded Gustav. Gustav quickly went to his bedroom and changed out of his clothing before leaving the house. About an hour and a half later, he arrived back in his home. One more to go, Gustav said as he stood in the middle of his living room and checked the time. He still had about 3 hours and some minutes left till midnight. Looks like there'll be enough time, Gustav said as he squatted. He placed his right index finger on the floor and used it to support his body weight before throwing the lower half of his body up. Pfui! In the next instant, Gustav was upside down with his index finger supporting his entire body. I just have to maintain this for 3 hours now, Gustav said internally as he reached out and grabbed onto the book he placed on the ground earlier. He raised the book with his left hand and opened the page he was reading earlier to pick off from where he stopped. Gustav remained in that position as he read from his book. About 30 minutes to 12 am, Gustav suddenly felt a weird feeling within himself. What's the? His eyes widened slightly as he sent his senses into his body. Am breaking through into the serial rank? Chapter 355. What's the? His eyes widened slightly as he sent his senses into his body. Am breaking through into the serial rank? Gustav voiced out with a delighted look. He sensed the bloodline plant roots that had grown out of his original bloodline expand into different corners of his body. This was normal when a mixed blood broke through to the serial rank. When the process was done, not only would bloodline channeling be easier and faster, new channels of power usage would be unlocked because the roots of the bloodline were now connected to every part of the body. To Gustav's surprise, his original bloodline didn't stop there after its roots spread to every part of his body. Huh! What is it doing? Gustav wondered as he noticed the roots were starting to move towards other bloodlines in his body. One after the other, the roots of his original bloodline began to connect to other bloodlines he had stolen and bought. Is this supposed to happen? Gustav asked internally. Well, you're the first creature to have so many bloodlines within you, so this seems to be a biological reaction, the system voiced out internally. Gustav's fingers suddenly started trembling as he felt hotness rushing from within when all the bloodlines had connected to his original completely. Zroiman. His body started turning red as his internals glowed up. What's this? All my bloodlines are suddenly sinking, Gustav muttered as he struggled to continue lifting his body up with his finger. After a few more minutes of holding on, the process came to an end. Sweat was already dripping from Gustav's forehead and falling to the floor. Fortunately for him, he was able to hold on and not fall off his finger, or the hours he spent in that position would have been for nothing. At this time, it was only about 10 minutes to 12 am, so in the next 2 minutes, Gustav would have completed the 3 hours daily task. Gustav sensed the transformation his bloodlines had just gone through. His mouth hung slightly open as he saw that every bloodline within him was now at the second step Zulu rank except for his genetic transformation bloodline, his original bloodline. His beast transformation bloodline was originally at the third step, but it decreased to the second step, and the others that were first step earlier had increased to second step. The ranks of every bloodline were now in sync. Gustav noticed that after his original bloodline was connected to every bloodline he had gotten, it was like the governing bloodline. He tried channeling his bloodline, and noticed that his other bloodlines were also being affected. So long as he tried increasing the level of his original bloodline by channeling it, it would also have an effect on the rest of them. Daily task completed. September 9th. Use a single finger to support your entire body weight for 3 hours. Gustav dropped his body down the moment this notification popped up in his line of sight. Finally, Gustav muttered as he proceeded to pick up the book he dropped some time ago when he was breaking through. He moved towards the sofa and took a deep breath after sitting down. Among all his other bloodlines, his original bloodline was the only one glowing slightly. He could feel faint energy oozing from it. "Now you have bloodline energy," the system announced. Gustav instantly recalled when Miss Amy first touched him after he gained this power. Bloodline energy has entered host bloodstream. Requirement for bloodline acquisition has been met. I remember Miss Amy used that to inspect our progress in bloodline channeling, and one of the requirements for bloodline acquisition is related to bloodline energy. Gustav squinted his eyes as he thought, does this bloodline energy have some kind of special features privy to every mixed blood that has achieved serial rank? Gustav decided to do more research on serial rank. He didn't do any research earlier because mixed bloods at this stage had no issues with breaking through to the next level so long as they had a bloodline grade above F. The only time mixed bloods will experience issues was when they had reached the Gilbert rank. Increasing bloodline rank from that level reduced was slower compared to lesser ranks. Based on bloodline grade, some might be slower and faster than others, but compared to the ease of breaking through from Zulu to Serial and from Serial to Gilbert, breaking through to Marshall was 2 times slower. It was common that as a mixed blood grew in strength, it became even harder to advance. Gustav began to do research regarding bloodline energy instead of going to bed for the night. However, he wasn't the only one awake by this time of the morning. Angie was also writhing and changing positions on her bed as she found herself unable to sleep for the night. Kill? Can I truly do it? All my life, I swore never to bring pain to another person, but how do I progress from this point if I can't do what is needed to be done? Angie squeezed herself together, as she imagined the nightmares and horrors that would haunt her if she took a person's life. Several hours passed, and Angie was still unable to sleep. I can't lose him. But I also don't want to lose myself. Tears dribbled out of her eyes as she thought. Isn't there another way besides becoming a killer? Is there another way? Angie wondered to herself. Her mind suddenly went back to Greater Zenatus' advice. I will truly become a liability to him if I am not decisive enough in times of danger. Angie thought. His point of view. I need to see from his point of view too. So many thoughts plagued Angie's mind as she stayed awake all night. At dawn, she went for a jog to clear her head. She still hadn't made a decision, but she had made plans of doing something later. Chapter 356. Angie bumped into Gustav somewhere behind the neighborhood, but when she called out to him, he ignored her. He didn't even turn to stare at her. He treated her like a gust of wind passing by. This made Angie feel lonelier and sad. Later during the day, she called Glade to catch her up on the latest development. Glade, of course, was furious at Gustav when she heard that. How could he tell you to do such a thing? He's an asshole. No, Glade, calm down. I understand why he wants that. After all, I might end up a liability for him, and he doesn't want that. Fuck him. Angie, you can just forget about him. There are many other guys around to choose from. It doesn't have to be Gustav. But I can't. I think I love him. But I think he doesn't love you. Have you seen his eyes? I don't think he loves anyone, don't say that. He has gone through a lot. He even changed. He used to be so brutal and uncaring in the past. I understand that he has gone through a lot, but that doesn't change the fact that he's a jerk for asking you to do such. I have to prove that I will not become a burden. TCH, of course you won't. Don't you know how strong you are, Angie? I do, but Glade, let me ask you something. Have you ever killed a person? Yes, if someone tries to kill you, will you kill them instead? Yes, I will not spare someone who has the intention of harming me, you see. I have never killed a person, and I don't know if I can ever kill a person. So? Who gives a damn? Who says you can't protect others without killing? I know I can, but in some cases, it may be necessary. You're not wrong about that. He ignored me today, and it felt like my heart was being torn apart. I never thought he would ever direct that cold gaze he gave others towards me. I can't explain how I felt. Angie cooped herself up on her bed as she voiced out. That jerk. Glade, I don't want to be able to take someone's life without batting an eyelid, but I want to be capable enough to do it when at the time it really matters. Are you sure about this? Once you kill a person, there's no way back from that, I know. But I don't want to end up making a mistake that will cause a person's death because of my softness. If that is what you want, I will support you in whatever way I can. One thing you always have to remind yourself is the fact that you're getting rid of a scum whose existence will cause problems and suffering to another person if left alive. It's like uprooting a virus. If it spreads, other people die, but if you can get rid of it, you save others. This is necessary to remember. I see. Just like that, another day went by, and weekend arrived. Gustav had spent the night hunting down some mixed breeds with his team. They were extremely surprised when they found out that he was now even more powerful than before. Gustav revealed the night before that he achieved the serial rank, causing the entire team to quiver in shock. Gustav's strength was already above serial rank even before achieving it. Now they wondered how powerful he was and how powerful he would become if he kept improving like this. Gustav visited Mr. Gon this weekend to go collect the flexible body armor that was made from the rock the other part of the system was trapped in. Gustav avoided Vera during his visit, but he noticed that, unlike the day before, she was rather calm and even ignored him in the presence of her grandpa. He wondered what she was playing at. After some idle talks, he went back to his home to continue his research. He had already rented another facility from Crimson Hunting Agency, and now he had a total of 30 employees. He had given them instructions on how the Crimson Hunting Agency should run in his absence, which he assumed was going to be about a year. Angie's father had agreed to be the manager, so he was going to leave the management in his hands. Angie's father had also noticed the weirdness between Angie and Gustav, but he decided he wasn't going to meddle because he felt the youngsters should handle their relationship issues themselves. Sunday came in the blink of an eye, and just like that, the 2-week break had ended. Monday was the day every mixed blood in the world that had been enlisted into the MBO would be expected to appear in the MBO base that Commander Cheyenne governed over. Gustav was in his apartment, resting after finishing his daily task. He would be going to see Miss Amy in a few hours, and they would have their last training session. Miss Amy had said she was going with him to the base, and she would leave for the city she was traveling to afterward. Tomorrow was the last time Gustav would be seeing her, and he had no idea when next he was going to see her since the training was supposed to last for 4 years. He knew he'd be sent for some low-ranked missions during those 4 years. According to Commander Cheyenne, there was no guarantee that he would ever be sent somewhere to meet Miss Amy again. Sigh. All good things must come to an end eventually. Gustav lamented inwardly. First, it was Boss Danzo. Angie was practically not in the picture. Now Miss Amy would also be gone by tomorrow. I need to ask her about Planet Humbad. Gustav decided he would ask Miss Amy. He needed more information since he only had 5 years for the quest, and he didn't know when he would see her again. Gustav decided to check his progress so far in the last 2 weeks. Underscore 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 host attributes name Gustav Crimson level 26 class subparallel being exp 1 820 300/5 700 000 HP 14500/14500 energy 7000/7200 attributes strength 72 perception 70 mental fortitude 70 agility 70 speed 70 bravery 70 intelligence 71 charm 70 defense 70 vitality 72 endurance 75 attributes points 30 underscore 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 underscore. Now that I think about it, what's the point of having charm stats? Gustav voiced out. Chapter 357. Now that I think about it, what's the use of having charm stats? Gustav voiced out. It doesn't help in battle. So maybe I should just focus my extra attribute points on other attributes. Gustav wondered out loud. You have no idea how monkish looking you were before. But this doesn't seem like a bad idea too. The system chimed in. Looks don't really help in battle. I want to focus more on improving strength. Gustav explained. Whatever you say, Sherlock. Gustav went on to check the progress of his skills. Skills. Level 7 sprint level 6 silent advancement level 4/level 8 palm strike level 6 super jump level 4 combination level 5 abilities regeneration level 5 morph level 5 toxin immunity level 4 recreation level 4 bloodline acquisition level 5 god eyes level 6. Gustav checked them one after the other and noted his progress. I wonder how many levels max out these skills, Gustav wondered after checking them out completely. He went on to check his bloodlines. Every single bloodline now had a new ability attached to it, including his original bloodline. Genetic transformation bloodline, grade, B abilities tied to bloodline frowny face shape shifting, joints reversal, size manipulation, cognitive concealment, partial mimicry. Underscore 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 underscore. This new ability allowed him to mimic the shape of a non-living thing for a few seconds. Gustav could only transform into another person, change his skin color or hide his presence with his bloodline before, but now he could partially take the shape of non-living things. However, he could only maintain it for less than 20 seconds. This ability was unlocked when he achieved the serial rank. Gustav went on to check the quest panel. Quests: locate Dimension 6 in Planet Humbad, duration, 5 years, progress, 0.12/100%, become the most powerful mixed blood on Earth, duration, 5 years, progress, 3/100%. Gustav skipped all other information and checked the progress of both quests. Turns out I haven't made any progress in my research lately. Gustav wasn't surprised seeing the minuscule progress on the location of Dimension 6. 6%? It only increased by 1. 3. Just how powerful is that guy? Gustav noticed that his progress on the quest to become the most powerful mixed blood in the next 5 years only increased by a minuscule amount. He checked his progress before breaking through to the serial rank so he could keep tabs of his progress afterwards. And Miss Amy is close to his level of strength, which means she really does go easy on me when we're training. How is that considered even going easy on someone? Gustav could remember just how severe Miss Amy's training was most of the time. He realized that even his complaints about her being too hard on him was actually her going easy. 5 years. I just have to give it my best shot then. Gustav clenched his fist tightly as a smirk appeared on his face. Although it seemed like an impossible challenge, he was still excited to see if he would be able to achieve it. After resting for some time, Gustav went ahead towards Mississippi Amy's place. 2 hours later. Bang! 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 Sounds of intense clashing reverberated across the place. It was a small building with a dojo-like structure. Bang! Arg! An exclamation of pain rang out as a body was sent crashing towards the door. Weakling! Miss Amy voiced out with a playful smile on her face as she stared at the defeated Gustav several feet away, leaning against the door. Ah, no fair, Miss Amy, Gustav said as he stood to his feet. Ha, you expect me to go gentle on you? So shameless, it's your last day of training. Let your master beat you to her heart's content. Miss Amy voiced out as she put down the weapon in her hand and raised her fists with a devilish smirk on her face. Hold on, Miss Amy, Gustav shouted while stretching out his palm with a wary look as he struggled to catch his breath. Miss Amy totally ignored his pleas and arrived before him. She dragged him to his feet and raised her hand. Miss Amy voiced out with a look of disbelief. If you hit me, it means you're hitting yourself, Gustav voiced out with playful laughter as he stared back at Miss Amy. He had transformed his face into that of Miss Amy's. Beautiful long flowing ash-colored hair with a very pretty face and tender-looking red lips. Miss Amy stared at her own face with a conflicted expression. Well, are you a masochist, Miss Amy? Would you hit yourself? Gustav asked with a cheeky smile. Shut up, Miss Amy voiced out as her hand descended on Gustav's head. Pow! Ow! Gustav exclaimed with a look of pain as he transformed back into his original look. You wanted to use such shameless moves to escape beating. Now it will be multiplied, Miss Amy voiced out while laughing, while Gustav's face showed despair as he crawled away in fright. A few minutes later, Gustav laid sprawled on the floor in the middle of the dojo. He was breathing in and out profusely with sweat all over his body. Miss Amy sat cross-legged on the other side with her eyes closed. She was like a deity sitting in place as tranquility oozed out from her as spreading into the surrounding. After a few more minutes of laying in place, Gustav sat up and stared at Miss Amy. By the way, Miss Amy, you never did tell me what your second bloodline is, Gustav voiced out. Miss Amy opened her eyes. You never asked? She responded. Well, I'm asking now, Gustav stated. All right, Miss Amy stated and stood to her feet. Follow me, she instructed. Gustav did as he was told and followed Miss Amy out. They were still in Gami Dojo, but the instant they arrived outside their own training building, Miss Amy grabbed Gustav by the hand. Swaya. Gustav only saw everywhere turn into a blur, and the next thing he knew, they had arrived at the top of Gami Dojo, which was well over 700 stories tall. Chapter 358. Gustav's eyes widened as she stared at the clouds surrounding them. Due to their current position, he couldn't even see the city beneath because of clouds reducing visuality. Miss Amy was still holding on to him. She waved her left arm. Vroo! The clouds surrounding them instantly scattered, allowing visuality to return back to normal. Apart from the MBO tower, there was no other building that was as tall as the one Gami Dojo resided in, so they couldn't see any other neighboring tall buildings opposite or on the sides. However, albeit tiny, the view of the city could be seen from this position. I never unleash my second bloodline because it's more powerful than my first, and is only capable of causing destruction. It's practically the opposite of my first, which is creation-related, Miss Amy explained. Gustav listened without saying a word. At my original strength, I can destroy half of this city by using one of my low-level attacks, Miss Amy added. Gustav's eyes widened even more as he heard that. He knew Miss Amy well, so he could tell that she wasn't bragging or spouting crap with this claim of hers. Let me take you somewhere else to demonstrate how disastrous my second bloodline is, Miss Amy decided before moving forward casually again while still holding on to Gustav. Just like earlier, Gustav only saw blurs, and in the next moment, she and Gustav appeared over a massive body of water that spanned for thousands and thousands of miles. This is the Pacific Ocean, Miss Amy voiced out as a purplish aura like light started beaming out of her body. They continued floating in midair, thousands of meters above the water. Gustav noticed that light rays in the environment started gathering and moving towards Miss Amy. Deactivate limiters for a few seconds, Miss Amy commanded. Zwukuk. The pressure on the entire vicinity instantly increased. The birds and every flying living creature avoided this area and started moving in the opposite direction due to fright. Gustav was right beside Miss Amy, so he was shielded from the massive pressure that was oozing from her presence. The aircraft flying over that area of the Pacific had alarms going off within it as the AIs installed within warned of the anomaly in the distance, and advised the pilot to change course. Space surrounding this area began to twist and turn. Watch! Miss Amy voiced out as she pointed her right finger towards the body of water below. In the next instant, thwoosh boom! A massive hole appeared in the middle of the ocean as walls of water ascended high up into the sky. Vrerhu! It was a phenomenal sight as Gustav and Miss Amy, who were thousands of meters in midair, were surrounded by the wall of massive waves that spanned for several 10,000 miles. Gustav could see the bottom of the ocean. He activated God Eyes and noticed the massive crater that had been created from Miss Amy's attack just now. Shock and overwhelming disbelief could not be used to describe how Gustav was feeling at the moment as he stared at the crater that was charred black with a red glow surrounding the edges. After about 30 seconds, the wall of waves descended back into the ocean as it slowly regained its tranquility. Miss Amy's limiter went back to being active, and she turned to stare at Gustav. So long as light exists, I can convert it to a power of destruction. Every form of light serves to empower my second bloodline, she explained. Gustav's wide-open mouth only closed a while later. This is practically being godlike. I had such a teacher the entire time? Gustav never doubted Miss Amy's strength, but seeing what she could do in person, he realized that he had really downplayed what she was capable of. This still made him wonder how powerful the most powerful mixed blood was for him to battle Miss Amy to a stalemate. Now I see why they can't get rid of her. It would definitely be a great loss to the MBO and to Earth if anything was to happen to Miss Amy, Gustav thought. Even though that man is very powerful, he's just one person. If something was to happen to Earth in the future, Miss Amy is insurance. What are you thinking of? Miss Amy asked after noticing Gustav's expression. Nothing. Miss Amy, I have another question. How many planets did you manage to conquer for Earth in your younger days? Gustav asked. I never joined them in such nonsense. Although I never did anything about it too. I always backed out of missions concerning conquering other planets, Miss Amy explained. Miss Amy, since you're this powerful, you could change the MBO yourself. I don't think you need me, Gustav voiced out. MMHH? It's more complicated than you think. You'll come to understand later why it has to be you, Miss Amy stated. Why do I feel like she's being held back by something? Like they have a... Gustav had a suspicious look on his face. You can do it. I believe in you. For now, you do not have enough power to shoulder the revelation of everything, so this is enough, Miss Amy added. Oh, Gustav muttered as Miss Amy bolted across the sky with Gustav in her arms. Swayai. In a few moments, they arrived back at the dojo. Miss Amy was capable of using light rays to increase her speed, so it was like she was teleporting. By the way, Miss Amy, what do you know about planet Humbad? Gustav asked as they arrived back in the dojo. The original planet of the Slarkovs? Elaborate, Miss Amy voiced out. Is there a possibility that planet Humbad is still in existence? Gustav asked outrightly. No, planet Humbad has been destroyed just like the historical records say, Miss Amy replied bluntly. But how can we know that this is truly correct if there's no proof? The historical records do say that, but what if it's incorrect? Gustav asked. One of Miss Amy's eyebrows raised up as she stared at Gustav. What makes you say this? Where are you going with these assumptions? She asked with a suspicious tone. Read the author's note below. Chapter 359. One of Miss Amy's eyebrows raised up as she stared at Gustav. What makes you say this? Where are you going with these assumptions? She asked with a suspicious tone. Well, what if? I mean, just what if Planet Humbad was still in existence and the history books have been wrong all along? Gustav said with a look of contemplation. Miss Amy gazed lingered on Gustav suspiciously. Miss Amy knew Gustav wasn't one to mention things like this flippantly. She could tell that this thought must be coming from somewhere, or something must have triggered it. I feel like you're onto something, but sorry to burst your bubble. Planet Humbad is no longer in existence, just as the history books say, Miss Amy said with a look of certainty before going back to closing her eyes once again. Gustav had a confused expression as he exclaimed. Why does she look so sure? He wondered. As if to answer his unspoken question, Miss Amy voiced out. I've been to that part of the galaxy before. There's nothing there. It's just an empty place in space. Void of life and beauty. Only the stench of destruction lingers in where Humbad used to lie. Miss Amy muttered with a slightly distressed voice. Oh. Gustav mumbled. This is gonna be harder than I thought, Gustav said internally with a slightly conflicted look. But for you to mention it. Tell me what you're onto. Why did you bring up such a topic? Miss Amy asked while opening one eye. Well, it's just a hunch. A strong hunch. Miss Amy, I believe the planet of Humbad still exists. I know that contradicts what you've seen, but still. Gustav couldn't tell Miss Amy that the system gave him a quest. For some reasons I need to find it, Gustav added. I see. Then I know what to do, Miss Amy replied. What are you planning, Miss Amy? Gustav asked. You need proof of its existence or inexistence. They'll send someone to investigate, Miss Amy voiced out. But I won't be seeing you anymore from tomorrow. I'm on a tight deadline for this research, Gustav stated. Numbskull, there are still many ways for me to communicate with you even though you'll be in the MBO camp. Don't worry, once I have anything I'll reach out to you, Miss Amy replied. That's a relief then. I'm counting on you, Miss Amy. Gustav smiled as he spoke. Miss Amy stared at him suspiciously before shaking her head with a wry smile on her face and going back to her meditation. I'll also be conducting investigations from my own side. Hopefully, I'll be able to discover something while in the MBO camp, Gustav said internally. A few hours later, Gustav was back home. He would be leaving from here to the airport with Miss Amy and Angie the next day. Although he had decided not to speak to Angie until she did the task he mentioned, meeting like this was inevitable. He couldn't totally avoid her. Just like that, the night went by, and Gustav woke up early the next morning to perform his daily tasks as quickly as he could. He only finished around 7 a.m., and went to take his bath and dress up. The previous day he had already cleared out his apartment, except for his bed. He moved all his things to Miss Amy's residence. Apparently, Miss Amy already bought the place, so he decided to keep all the stuff that he couldn't carry with him there. Gustav took all his necessary luggage that included several pieces of equipment and pieces of clothes. They arrived at the airport around 8 a.m., where a private aircraft was already waiting for them in one of the hangars. These aircraft were only privy to the participants who had been enlisted into the MBO. Gustav happened to meet Rhea, Timmy, Glade, Matilda, and some other participants that he recognized from back then. Glade gave him a piercing stare as he sat somewhere in the middle on the left side. Gustav ignored the stare and kept looking forward with an unbothered expression. Miss Amy could more or less sense the hidden tension between Gustav and Angie on their way here, but she had decided not to butt into his affairs like that. Especially this type that seemed quite delicate. The aircraft lifted off into the sky, and in a few seconds they were halfway across the city. Angie's parents, along with Phil and a lot of other parents, had tears in their eyes as they waved off at the 5 aircraft that disappeared into the clouds above. Reporters and media agencies had captured this scene, and 100 mixed bloods that left the city at this moment had become more popular than ever. They believed that the next time these mixed bloods appeared back in the city, they'd have become very powerful, and they also believed that the achievements these 100 would accomplish in the future would allow the city to be recognized even more. This same scene was happening in practically every city in the world except for those that didn't have mixed bloods who participated in the entrance test. Gustav had a headphone on his head as he listened to some music while staring at the clouds. Ah yes, he's incredible. He strikes me as edible. Prince Charming, his iris glow magical. Come take me in your arms. Yusha's songs are quite soothing to the ears. Too bad I won't be able to attend her concerts anytime soon, Gustav thought as he remembered the purple-haired dazzling singer. The aircraft passed over the ocean that Miss Amy nearly disintegrated the day before. However, there was no sign that something happened the day before. After passing above several cities, they finally arrived above a small wasteland that led to an exalted mountain range. This place existed between the borders of two cities, which is currently the highest mountain region on Earth. An MBO base was located atop this mountain region. It was the same MBO base that the participants were brought to after the completion of the entrance test 2 weeks back. Second chapter will be out in a few hours. Chapter 360. Their aircraft landed on the eastern side of the base, where several hangars were located. They weren't the only ones landing. Several other aircraft were also seen arriving moments later. Some had even arrived before them. Officers in different sets of MBO uniforms could be seen moving around. Convoys were already waiting for them, so the instant they landed, they were asked to get in to be transported to another location within the MBO base. This place was like a mini-city, so vehicles moving around the place, carrying officers from location to location, was a norm. Minutes later, everyone arrived in an open place where flowers could be seen encircling a large field. This field had seats arranged in rows and columns and an exalted podium in front. The youngsters arriving began to fill the seats one after the other. According to the instructions, everyone that was dressed in the white uniforms was among the outfits provided for all the cadets. After a few more minutes, the whole place had been filled up. There were over 1,000 youngsters sitting within this field, and several MBO officers stood behind the podium. They seemed to be waiting for someone. Miss Amy was back in the apartment Gustav, and the others had stayed during the last time they arrived here. Several seconds later, a group of convoys arrived at the field where the participants waited. Organized-looking combat troops filed out of the vehicles. They all moved towards the most luxurious-looking one, and stood on the sidelines as a man came out of the vehicle. The man had white and gray hair with a rhombus-shaped green crystal in the middle of his forehead. Merely staring at him, you could tell he was no ordinary officer. So far, all the officers were nothing to scoff at, with the way they carried themselves and their gallant movements. However, this middle-aged-looking man was more vibrant-looking. Every one of his steps had a certain powerful charm oozing out. His uniform was also different. It was crystalline silver in color. Chatter. 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 Dash. Who is that? The place became quite noisy as the man approached the podium. Most of them had no idea who the man was, but with the way the officers bowed in respect, they could tell he was no ordinary officer. Only Gustav and the rest that were with him last 2 weeks recognized the man. Some had ideas of who he was due to the rare uniform look, but they weren't sure. I am Great Commander Cheyenne and I welcome you all today. He started speaking. A lot of the participants had looks of shock on their faces. Everyone who was here today had done their research about the MBO, so they knew 1 or 2 things about the internals of the MBO that were unknown to the masses. They had heard about the 5 great commanders who governed the MBO. These 5 were on the levels of world leaders of the Earth today. They had a say in the affairs of the Earth. When meetings were conducted on a decision that affected the state of the Earth as a whole, they were among the leaders with the right to attend such meetings. They wondered why such an influential figure would be addressing them today. Even the normal officers also wondered what was so special about this set that one of the great commanders decided to address them at the initiation ceremony. The whole place turned silent after a few seconds of shock and light chatter. You have passed through the vigorous tests and not only survived through it but came out as one of the best, he stated. I'm here to tell you that this is only the beginning. Being here today means you're committed to becoming the finest and most powerful mixed bloods on the planet, and you shall go through the flames of training to become that. Being a mixed blood officer is not just limited to protecting the citizens from internal danger like terrorist organizations, but also from dangers of intergalactic forces. You will be trained to become the best protective force across galaxies. As you train, lots of confidential information will be revealed, and it is your job to keep such information to yourself for the safety of the MBO, the planet, as well as your families and loved ones. Great Commander paused as he got to this point. Understand one thing. Your loyalty to the MBO and to the safety of Earthlings comes first before any other thing. Gustav felt Great Commander Cheyenne gaze lingering on him for a few seconds when he got to this point. Come forward one after the other to receive the emblem and officially become cadets. Great Commander Cheyenne voiced out as he pointed at the left side of the podium. A glowing spherical white circle could be seen floating in midair on the left side. One after the other, names were called, and the participants approached the podium. Gustav's name was unsurprisingly called first. He moved forward gracefully amidst the gazes of admiration, envy, and jealousy and arrived within the circle. Zion! A body-like emblem with large red-colored blood within appeared on the right chest area of his white uniform. Gustav stared at it for a few moments before going back to his sitting area. After Gustav was a youngster with long silver hair that reached his bum area. His entire being oozed a majestic aura as he walked gracefully towards the podium. His eyes were closed the entire time, but it seemed like he was able to see clearly as he arrived at the circle. Some participants recognized this guy to be one of the special class candidates. Still, most people had no idea of his power level. After he got his emblem as he walked down the podium, he turned his face towards Gustav's direction, and a slight smile appeared on his face as he nodded before going back to his seat. It would seem the special class candidates were the first who were called upon to get their emblems. Gustav couldn't recognize any of them, but he could feel the power coming from them, so he knew they were no ordinary cadets. Dash. Oh my, that's Elevera. Dash. I know her, wasn't she said to be the most powerful among all special classes? Dash. No, I think Damon is the most powerful. Dash. Idiot, she's from Plankton City and she's almost at Gilbert rank. Dash. What the fuck? She's almost at Gilbert rank? Dash. I thought Gustav was the strongest. The place became noisier as a beautiful-looking female figure walked towards the podium. Feeling unmotivated to write recently. Chapter 361. The place became noisier as a beautiful-looking female figure walked towards the podium. She had a gem, azure-colored hair with pigtails on both sides of her head and one behind. Her eyes were dim but looked very confident without an ounce of pride. Her beauty was comparable to that of Yahiko's with her love-shaped face, pointed nose and full pale red lips. Her forehead was wrapped with a purple-colored head tie which had everyone wondering what the purpose of that could be. But since the great Commander Cheyenne didn't question it, everyone overlooked it. This girl happened to be the third special class aside from Adries and Endrick. She never revealed herself during the entire entrance test, even though she was in the MBO Tower in Plankton City. Some of the participants debated about the strongest special class. Now that some of their ranks were being revealed, they discovered that Gustav was actually the lowest rank. Although they had no idea that Gustav was already serial ranked. Dash. There's also Colton from Burning Sands City, he's the closest person to her level of strength. Dash. Damn, these special class candidates are just on another level. Dash. I don't think Gustav Crimson is the most powerful anymore, but we can't be sure since he has never displayed his full abilities too. In the next 30 minutes, over 1,000 participants were done with receiving the emblem. Great Commander Cheyenne went on to say a few more things regarding how rules will be set, and how they're meant to follow it accordingly over at the camp. Now you all get a piece of tech as part of your assistant's gadgets, over at the training camp. The special class candidates get 3 and some other benefits, Great Commander Cheyenne stated. Before you are all transported to the training camp, I would like to award a group for their performance in the final phase," he added before calling out Gustav, Angie, Matilda Falco and Glade. The crowd of cadets were astonished at the sudden turn of events. However, some of them had witnessed what went down, so not everyone had a surprised look on their faces. Gustav and the others walked to the podium, filed out, and stood on the right side of the podium. They all had. These 5 did a great job of protecting the lives of many participants. Their steadfastness and reaction to scenarios is precisely what is needed in the MBO. Great Commander Cheyenne said with a powerful tone of gratitude. Some of them had questioning looks on their face as they stared at Gustav, and the rest wondering what went down. They will be given the opportunity to visit the weaponry and pick a gadget of their choice besides the one that will be given in camp. Gustav Crimson Fallout, Gradia stated. Gustav moved forward and stood on the right side of Great Commander Cheyenne. Great Commander Cheyenne held onto a red star and turned to face Gustav before placing it on the left side of his chest area. As the cadet with the best performance, you have hereby attained the Kaiser personnel rank, Officer Crimson, Commander Cheyenne stated after the action was completed. All the officers in the vicinity stretched their right arm forward and slammed it on their chests with a look of respect. Apparently, this was a form of salute in the MBO. Gasp. Dash. Did he just attain a personnel rank? Dash. It might be the lowest rank, but this is really something unprecedented. Dash. As expected of someone like Gustav. Dash. Even though some of the special class outstrip him in mixed blood rank, he still attained an MBO personnel rank before anyone else. No one expected this, so the looks of surprise were visible on their faces. Behind E and Angie smiled and clapped their hands with looks of delight. The special class cadets amidst the crowd all had looks of disbelief on their faces. Since they didn't participate in the final phase of the test, they were even more in the dark about anything that went down. From the crowd, Elevra stared at the star on Gustav's chest with a look of longing and admiration before staring at his face. Wonderful. Looks like I might have competition, she said to herself. Eldris also stared at Gustav with a look of admiration. He is way better than his little brother. Amazing, not all the special class candidates were happy with the current development of things, so some of them had decided to put in their best efforts when they arrived at the camp. Now you all are to move towards the Glade 2 terminal where transport vehicles have been prepared for you, Great Commander Cheyenne said as the place quietened. Follow me, Great Commander Cheyenne said to Gustav and the rest as he climbed down the podium. The place turned noisy again, but a few officers came forward and organized the cadets' movement towards Glade 2 terminal. Gustav, along with Angie and the remaining 3, were transported along with Great Commander Cheyenne towards a part of the base. In a few seconds, they arrived in front of a massive circular blue structure. Officers couldn't be seen too much around here, and it was well guarded also. This was the gadgets and weaponry storage place. They moved in, and the first thing they saw was different entrances to different sectors where the technology gadgets were classified. Great Commander Cheyenne told them that they only had about 20 minutes to go into any sector of their choice and pick one gadget each. Since they didn't know their way around here, this would be a tough call for all of them. Gustav wasted no time looking around. He instantly went into Sector 3. The others were still at the entrance with looks of confusion. They had no idea when Gustav went in because the instant the time limit was given, he had already gone forward. When they noticed that he wasn't around them anymore, they immediately chose which sectors to visit, and everyone went their separate ways. Chapter 362. The place was so large that there were 32 sectors. They already knew that it would be impossible to scout all the sectors properly before 20 minutes were up, so it was now down to luck for them to pick something of true value. Gustav arrived within the sector some moments ago, and waited not even a second longer before he started scanning all that was before him with God eyes. Although non-living things had a particular color that they showed, God eyes were capable of reading energy levels of things with power stored within. Also, the colors change based on the kind of energy a tool is being powered by. This was what Gustav was making use of at the moment. He inspected each and every piece of equipment he came across, one after the other. Every piece of equipment was arranged in rows and columns, floating in mid-air within a glowing milky light. Each piece of equipment was separated from the others, so there was enough space for people to pass the midst of different pieces of equipment and study them. At the moment, all Gustav could see were some round metallic-looking baby palm-sized balls. He took out one of them and pressed the button. Zun! A protective electromagnetic shield surrounded him in an instant. He tapped the button back to deactivate it, and put it back in its rightful place. Although the ball-like equipment around looked the same, some of them actually had different kinds of shields, and some were actually a barrier that sent attacks back to the direction they came from. Gustav could tell they had different properties due to God eyes, but he wasn't really interested in these, so he dashed forward to a place with another category of items. Gustav arrived at a place where eye-shaped devices could be seen all over the place. He could already see that these items had different energy points, so he picked the one with the highest. Gustav held it in front of himself and tapped it. Zryoin! Gustav suddenly noticed his line of sight had been divided in two. He was no longer only seeing in front of himself. He could also see behind him now. What in the world? It's like having eyes in front and behind, Gustav was astonished. He felt like such an item could really come in handy, so he marked this spot. He decided to come back here later if he couldn't find anything satisfactory. Gustav decided to move towards another place where different items were positioned again. Over on ES side, he had entered section 1 since he was so confused about which one to go into first. He wasn't bothered because he happened to be the most fortunate one here. The moment he arrived at a place, checked out the equipment, and was not satisfied, he would just sink into the vortex on the ground and instantly arrive in a new spot. In 3 minutes, he had already inspected 9 items and was moving towards the 10th. He only needed to open a vortex to arrive in another sector if he wanted to, unlike the rest that still had to use the entrance and exit. He arrived in another sector and moved towards the west side. He held onto a disc-like gadget and wanted to check out its functions when a projection appeared above it, displaying a massive explosion. Oh, this seems pretty cool. A 3 times restorative explosive device? Over at Angie's side, she didn't look like she was in a hurry, unlike others. She took her time inspecting one item after the other. She felt she hadn't even come across any bad item. She was just finding it hard to make a choice because, according to her, they were all good. Glade and Matilda also shared this calmness. On the other hand, Falco had been taken over by his alter ego again, who went around cursing every officer in place and insulting them on their choices of weaponry. Just like that, 20 minutes went by, and they were directed out of the sectors by officers when the badge they were given expired. They all had different items with different shapes in their hands as they arrived outside. Angie was already back outside before the rest because she had already made her pick. Everyone else had to be brought out by the officers, and from the looks of things, they only picked up items at the last minute. Falco regained control of himself and had a wide-open mouth as he stared at the edge-shaped golden item in his hand. "This idiot, you ruined my one-in-a-lifetime opportunity!" Falco shouted out as he fell to his knees with a look of dissatisfaction. What he wanted to pick was different from what his alter ego had chosen. Among everyone else, he was the only one lamenting. The others seemed to be satisfied with what they had picked. "Fantastic choice, everyone. Now, Falco, don't be too quick to judge. That's an unhatched biomechanical fused mixed breed. You'll understand when it hatches," Great Commander Cheyenne stated. "An explosive restorative disc, good pick, Commander Cheyenne said as he stared at the disc in ES hand. "A speed multiplier, good one." This time, he stared at Glade and voiced out. Great Commander Cheyenne kept calling out the items they picked one after the other and checked out Gustav's choice last. A grade 7 spatial bracelet. Marvelous pick. The tone of astonishment in his voice was higher this time. There are only 2 grade 7 spatial bracelets in the entire 33 sectors. It can't be a coincidence that he managed to attain one, Great Commander Cheyenne thought as he stared at the silver bracelet in Gustav's grasp. Gustav wore the bracelet on his left wrist, and it turned invisible a while later. Angie happened to get an item Gustav wasn't interested in earlier. It was the same silver ball that cast an electromagnetic protective shield around him earlier. Her will to protect others is still as strong as ever, Gustav noted. A few minutes later, the 6 of them were transported towards the terminal, where other cadets were also brought to. This was where their trip to the MBO camp will begin. Chapter 363. A few minutes later, the 6 of them were transported towards the terminal, where other cadets were also brought to. This is where their trip to the MBO camp will begin. To their surprise, it wasn't a place where they were supposed to be transported by aircraft or land vehicles. They could see a few cadets were still here waiting their turn to enter what seemed like an underground tunnel. It had been 20 minutes already, so only about 100 more cadets were left. Within the underground tunnel, a large circular transparent structure could be seen. It had around 6 seats, and the cadets could be seen entering them. The underground gondola will take you to the training camp. Great Commander Cheyenne voiced out as he stared at the structure in the tunnel. 3 more arrived behind it, and more cadets went into the tunnel to enter the structure of their choice. After sitting, a strap wrapped around their bodies and held them tightly to the seat, and in the next moment, the circular transparent structure sank into the ground that opened up. Zoom! Gustav and the rest had looks of astonishment as they stared at the underground tunnel where they'd be transported from. This is how we have kept the location of the training camp private from the world. Great Commander Cheyenne noticed the look on their face and voiced out. Gustav didn't need to ask why. He already had a few theories in his mind. Has the training camp been attacked before? He asked. It seems you've figured it out already. Great Commander Cheyenne nodded slightly as he responded. You lots are the future leaders of the MBO. With your potential, the MBO is meant to get even more powerful in the future, so of course there'll be forces that want to cripple that. Great Commander Cheyenne added. The rest had looks of understanding on their faces as they figured out what Great Commander Cheyenne was referring to. As more underground gondolas arrived, the number of cadets reduced even more. However, the group didn't move forward the whole time. They decided to wait for their turn. A few more minutes later, the whole place was cleared out, and the group started moving forward towards the one that had just arrived. Gustav paused his movement when he remembered something and went back to meet Great Commander Cheyenne. Remember our deal. You owe me one favor, Gustav said to him. Oh yes, young Gustav, I haven't forgotten. Great Commander Cheyenne responded with a smile. Good, how do I contact you in case I want to call on that favor? Gustav asked. Haha, nothing ever passes your eyes, eh? Great Commander Cheyenne shook his head as he laughed lightly. He was referring to the fact that Gustav had figured they wouldn't be able to contact the outside world within the camp. If Gustav had gone just like that, he wouldn't be able to cash in the favor until after the training period. Commander Cheyenne brought out a white button-sized object and gave it to Gustav. Make sure you only make use of that communication tool when you want to cash in the favor. It's a one-time communication device that has the capacity to send messages through space, so even if I'm not on Earth at the time you make use of it, you will still be able to contact me. Great Commander Cheyenne explained. Gustav nodded in understanding as he received the device and transferred it to his storage button. Remember, it's a one-time usage device. After you make use of it once it gets destroyed, Great Commander Cheyenne warned. I heard you the first time, old man, Gustav said as he turned around and started walking forward. The officers in the vicinity had widened eyes as they stared at Gustav, expecting the Great Commander to do something about Gustav's disrespect, but to their surprise, Great Commander Cheyenne only laughed it off. So nostalgic, Commander Cheyenne said internally as he stared at Gustav walking towards the underground gondola. In his eyes, Gustav's stature interlapped with a familiar feminine figure who had ash-colored hair. Gustav arrived in front of the underground gondola and moved in to sit. The 5 had been waiting for Gustav, and now only one seat was left within the gondola. Coincidentally, that seat happened to be beside Angie. Gustav moved towards the left and took his seat on her right. The atmosphere turned a bit weird since Gustav just took his seat without saying a word to anyone, especially Angie. Thush! The circular, transparent underground gondola closed up after everyone got strapped in. The ground underneath opened up, revealing a dimly lit hole that extended as far as the eyes could see. Zoon! The underground gondola descended into the hole with immense speed. It traveled through the whole underground, moving at a speed of Mach 20. This was well over 1,000 miles per second. Everyone felt woozy as their sight turned blurry due to the immense speed. All they could see was white light moving past the vehicle at a very fast speed as they descended. At a point, they could feel the underground gondola turning when they got to an intersection underground. The place was constructed so well, with some metallic bars placed against the walls of the holes. These bars were like rail tracks, and they used out a kind of gravitational force that made the transport of the gondola smooth, so accidents were prevented. They had only been falling for about 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Even Angie, who was a speedster, was affected because this was way beyond her speed level. Zoom! A minute later, the underground gondola began to slow down, and due to this, they noticed the light glow in the distance, which signified they had gotten to their destination. The light was an opening. Zien! After a few more seconds, the gondola entered the bright opening. It opened up for them to come out as they arrived in the middle of a forest full of tall purple-colored trees. Chapter 364. Gustav turned to the side to stare at his left palm. A soft palm was currently on his, clenching onto his palm tightly. "Oh, sorry," Angie voiced out as she let go of Gustav's palm with an embarrassed look. "It's cool," Gustav muttered as he turned away to look around. He also didn't notice this due to their arduous means of transportation. Everyone looked around to see where they had arrived. Apart from the several MBO officers in the vicinity, nothing else could be seen. The cadets that had gone before them were also nowhere to be found. This made Gustav's suspicions rise as he jumped down from the gondola, ready to activate his bloodline. He stared at the 7 officers in the vicinity who surrounded the underground gondola. "Finally, you maggots have arrived!" One of them with a bald head voiced out from the middle of the encirclement. E and Glade's faces lit up with a suspicious look as they stood beside Gustav quickly. The gondola descended back underground, and the opening closed up. "Where are the others?" Gustav asked while raising one eyebrow up and observing the encirclement of the 7 officers. Angie, Falco, and Matilda also sensed the atmosphere was quite tense due to the way Gustav stared at everyone suspiciously. "You'll be meeting up with them soon," another one of them spoke. It was a female officer with 4 ponytails and a star-shaped scar on her chin area. The encirclement grew tighter as Gustav looked around for possible escape routes before dashing forward. Swissish. To his surprise, their eyes followed his movement speed, and one of them arrived in front of him the next instant, throwing out a fist towards his face. Gustav descended with speed and slid forward, passing in between the officer's legs. The officer had a surprised look on his face as Gustav slid through, and arrived behind him. He conjured a vortex on his left palm and threw it out towards the officer, who had already turned around with speed to attack Gustav again. Fwum! His fist went through the vortex and arrived behind him. The officer was about to punch himself from behind due to the teleportation when he stopped. All this happened in almost an instant, surprising the rest. They caught up to speed and dashed forward also, but then in the next second, the officers paused and started clapping. "Looks like the reports were correct about your quick reaction to unexpected scenarios." The bald officer spoke up with a smile. The tension in the environment suddenly disappeared as the officers broke the encirclement. "You get a 10, you a 9, you an 8, and the rest of you a 5 each," the bald officer voiced out while pointing at Gustav, Glade, and the others. "I am Officer Bryant, one of your trainers," he voiced out as he arrived in front of Gustav and extended a hand. Gustav could tell that there was no ill intention behind this, so he shook the hand. good to finally meet you, Gustav Crimson, he said before turning to stare at the rest. You must be Glade, Ng Matilda, and the double standard Falco, he said while pointing out the names of everyone. The other officers also began introducing themselves. So you all must be wondering where the others are and why you arrived in the middle of nowhere, Officer Bryant said. He noticed their looks of intrigue and added, Welcome to the MBO training camp, he said as he turned around and started walking towards the left. Eh? But this is in the middle of nowhere, he voiced out. Follow me, Officer Bryant instructed. Everyone did as instructed and followed Officer Bryant towards a tree positioned in front. To their surprise, Officer Bryant didn't come to a stop when he arrived in front of the tree. Instead, he kept walking and walked through it. Gustav and the others were a little surprised. This was the MBO, so they were not so surprised since things were always different with them. The other officers beckoned to them as they also went through the tree. The others paused and stared at Gustav with a questioning gaze. Let's go, Gustav voiced out as he walked forward. Everyone else followed and went in one after the other. Truing in. The instant they went in, they found themselves within a large hall with 3 massive mirrors. The one they had just come out from showcased the forest area they just came out from. The other 2 mirrors displayed different places also. In front, they could see the several hundred cadets sitting around waiting. These cadets had looks of admiration when staring at Gustav. They seemed to have witnessed the little scene that went down when Gustav arrived with the others. The hall was very large, and youngsters could be seen moving across the place occasionally. There were different counters up ahead, and the one handling the cadets that had just arrived was on the left. You 6 are special class cadets, so you don't have to wait for your pass. Move over to the receptionist area on the left and get it, Officer Bryant voiced out. Well, see you around, kids, Officer Bryant said as he and his team walked away. Other officers in the vicinity saluted when they saw him. Margaret really decided not to show up, he said internally as they walked away. Gustav and the rest did as they were told. There was a line as well as lots of cadets waiting on the line, but there was also an empty side of the counter. No one stood in front of this one, but there was an officer behind it too. They arrived in front and got their passes from the lady officer. Your package will be delivered to your rooms later today. Within will be a set of camp instructions as well as materials needed and a timetable of lessons, she said after giving out the passes. Your pass is not only your key to assessing different places and your rooms but also contains a map, she added. Gustav and the others nodded in understanding and started moving towards the exit point. The instant they exited the hall, their line of sight was greeted by a vast wasteland. There will be no chapters for the next 2 to 3 days. Privileged chapters will also be unavailable for purchase due to reset. I'm resetting it to make the tiers more affordable and also adding in more chapters, so only the chapters that I have stockpiled will be released to fill in the new privileged tiers. However, they will be unavailable for purchase because I'm not going to be writing any more chapters for 2 to 3 days as I mentioned earlier. Thank you all for understanding. Chapter 365. The instant they exited the hall, their line of sight was greeted by a vast wasteland. This wasn't what they had expected as they looked around them, not understanding what was up with the environment. The large building they were just coming out of was like the middle of this wilderness. They activated their map and noticed that this place was on the far edge of the map, and to get out, they'd have to move towards the west. They started their journey and began to move in the required direction. As they traveled, they found out that they were not the only ones moving in this direction. They could see some other cadets in white uniform just like them too. Some were even moving in towards the opposite direction. It would seem that they were heading for the hall. Swoosh. Zoom. 2 cadets on a flying board-like technology bolted across the air towards the direction of the hall. About 20 minutes later, Gustav and the others arrived at the end of the wilderness-like area. This place happened to be on very high ground, and now they could see far into the training camp from this height. There were many large structures and well-constructed paths leading to different places. They were all astonished as they stared at the well-constructed environment. Gustav activated God Eyes to look around. Training Simulation Hall 3, Enhancement Factory, Battle Arena, Gustav stated internally, one after the other while staring at the structures ahead. They started descending from the high ground area towards the path that led to the direction of the residential areas. According to the map, there were different residential areas, and they were categorized a hobbit, hunter, mascot, and dragon for the males. For the females, they were ogre, nature, light, and tigress. All residences were graded from lowest to highest, with hobbit being the least and dragon being the best for males, while ogre was the worst for females and tigress was the best. At present, all special classes were placed in the best residences, both on the male and female sides, while the rest were randomly placed in other residences. Some with luck still got good residences that were only a notch below those of the special class, while those who weren't so lucky were placed in the worst residences. As Gustav and the others got to an intersection, they had to separate due to the girls' residential area being located a bit far from that of the boys. "Why don't we meet up later after settling down?" he suggested. "Good idea, Min." Falco was the first to agree to it before Matilda and Angie also gave agreed. "You'll be busy," Gustav stated and continued moving forward. "Oh, he had a slightly disappointed look on his face as he heard that. "You guys can go on without me," he added as he kept walking forward. Glade glared at him from behind with a pissed-off look while Angie looked down dejectedly. The boys later followed Gustav a few seconds later as the group separated. More and more youngsters dressed in white uniforms like them could be seen moving across the vicinity. Some were coming in while others were moving along the path like them. They gathered a lot of attention, and Gustav could hear some of them whisper to themselves, "Fresh blood." He could tell these were most likely their seniors here. A few minutes later, they arrived in front of a 20-story building painted brown with a dragon-shaped head at the top. According to the map, they had arrived at the dragon's residence. There were 7 other buildings just like the one they were standing in the vicinity. All 8 buildings had the same look with not a single sign of difference. The problem now was how to ascertain which particular building was the one they were to lodge in. According to the female officer at the reception hall, the pass in their hand was only going to open the room they were assigned to. Gustav's pass was for room 305, Falco's was 306, and he was 307. Their rooms' numbers followed one another, but then they asked someone a while ago where these rooms were supposed to be located, and the person responded that every house had 310 rooms. This meant that every building had rooms 306, 307, and 308, but they all looked the same. "Falco, check this one, I'll check the one behind." Check the one on the left," Gustav instructed. "Remember it's gonna be on the last floor, so move to the last floor instantly," Gustav added before dashing forward. Falco went into the building right away while Gustav circled around the building, arriving in front of the one behind. On the other hand, sunk into the vortex on the ground and instantly arrived on the last floor of the building on the left. He walked across the corridor, looking for room 308. Every room was quite a distance from the other, which meant that the size of each room was massive. The instant Gustav arrived in front of the building, he leaped upwards. Thump! His body ascended over 100 feet in the air, and he landed on a balcony closest to the 20th floor. This was the only opening in the building that could be seen from outside since there were no opened windows, so Gustav had to make do with it. Luckily for him, whoever the room belonged to was not in, so he left through the person's door and dashed through the corridor towards the last floor. Gustav arrived there in a few seconds after taking the teleportation elevator. Gustav realized that leaping through the balcony was totally unnecessary since there was a teleportation elevator in the building. Falco was the only one who went in the normal way and came out of the building a while later after figuring out that the building he entered was the wrong one. Sorry for the lack of chapters these past few days. I ended up taking a longer break than expected. Chapters update will go back to normal from tomorrow. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.